BRYCE LISTON, welcome to the Undraped Artist Podcast.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, it's my pleasure. I'm excited because I don't know how long you've lived in Utah, maybe longer than me, but we're practically neighbors, and this may be the first time we're going to talk for more than 10 minutes. So I'm really excited.
I thought about that a lot the last couple of days, and it's like we live so close together, but I think we've seen each other 3 or 4 times, said hi, a little chat here and there. And I was like, I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, life happens, families, work, whatever. But where do you live exactly? How far from downtown are you?
I'm in Holiday.
Oh, so you're literally just like 4 or 5 miles from me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah, I know where your studio is, but where do you live?
I live in the Avenues in Salt Lake.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I didn't know. Okay, yeah, so close. Yeah, we should do more things together.
I know. So how long have you been in Utah? Are you born and raised here?
I'm born and raised here. Yeah, Pleasant Grove. So that's down in, people who don't know, it's just a county south of here. So Pleasant Grove, American Fork, Warren, Provo, down there, Utah County.
Right. So tell me a little bit about how you got into art. I thought I knew something about you, and then I asked one of my students who's looked into you a lot, and I was way off base. So I'm really anxious to find out more about you.
I'd almost like to hear what you.
I think I messaged you about it, and I had said something about you studying with Camille, and I had it all mixed up. Camille Corey. Well, anyway, why don't you just tell me a little bit about? Start back from your childhood, and whether you were interested in art back then, and then work your way through your education a little bit. I'd love to hear your history.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. So my mom was an artist, so I kind of got that from her. And, I've heard that from a lot of your podcasts, watched a few of your podcasts, and it's interesting how many people you've interviewed said a parent was an artist, and they kind of followed in their footsteps. And I don't know if it's in the genes or what, but, father was very mechanical, mother was an artist. So I kind of gravitated toward that a little bit. And, growing up, I remember I was pretty young, and she would go out on these plein air excursions with all of her friends. And I must have been, I don't know, 8, 9, I don't remember. And I know that probably have to hear it from her. She's passed away by now, but I'd have to hear it from her. But she's been gone for a long time now. I'm sure I was miserable to be with. She's out there wanting to paint with her friends. She has to take this little kid along with her. And she learned at one point, I like to put models. I don't think people put models together anymore. Plastic models.
I do.
Did you do for a kid? Yeah. I don't think they even exist anymore, really. But I loved putting models together. So that was my mechanical side. I have mechanical and I have artistic side. So she learned that if she bought me a model, and then she went out on her plein air excursions, she could set me up on the hood of the car with, the modeler's glue and the model, and I was just happy as a clam, and I could just leave her alone. She'd go out and paint. So that's one of the earliest memories I recall. And of course, it was the model that I was excited about. But I think being around that environment and doing that, somehow it percolates through you, and it comes from interest, I guess. You're interested in it more than other things, and so you just start doing more and more. And then you get into high school and you start taking lots of art classes. But I think one story I like to always throw out there is, I liked art, and I was, most of us, I think all artists, when we were young, we did art. But I remember one time in junior high and I think we all had to go through this, you had to go to a counselor, and they start counseling you about what you want to be when you grow up. And at this point, my mom had to come in with me. And I remember sitting there with the counselor, and then this question, she says, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "An artist." And she just kind of threw that out, looked at her paperwork, says, "No, that's not an acceptable answer.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And the funny thing is, my mom didn't say anything, and I'll get to that later.
Okay.
but I just sat there for a second. I thought, I'm architect. I said architect. She said, oh, that's acceptable. And she wrote architect down. So the rest of the time through school, I took lots and lots and lots of drafting classes. So I was going to be an architect. And I took lots of art classes too, obviously. So, I mean, my senior year, I think it's kind of funny with the classes my kids took. And of course, they're a lot better in school than I was, which I'm thankful for. But my senior year was three drafting classes, three art classes, and a journalism class, which was a yearbook, which consisted of nothing. I had the easiest senior year possible. But so, I had a dual interest, but I was going to be an architect. And then right toward the end of our senior year, we took a field trip down to, so this was in Pleasant Grove. So the nearest college was Brigham Young University. So they wanted us to take us down and show us what the future of drafting was. So we traveled down there and watching what people in college were doing in architecture and drafting, and realizing it was all now being done on AutoCAD or CAD programs. It was being done on a computer. And one of the reasons why I still like architecture was it was still done by hand. I love, we're artists. We love doing something. We love building something. And I love drawing. And I was also at that point, and if your young readers, probably your young viewers don't realize this, in 1983, computers were not user-friendly. They were, there was coding. I mean, AutoCAD was a heavy program. But I was kind of scared of computers.
So is 1983 when you went to BYU then?
Yeah, that was my graduating year.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm old.
Okay.
And so that I panicked. I panicked, and I thought, it's kind of stupid. In hindsight, you never know what would have happened if you chose something different. But had I not panicked and continued down that road, things would have been completely different. But I wonder why I panicked so much. And I thought, well, you go to college, they would have taught me how to do that program, and things would have been just fine probably. But I just couldn't see myself doing all that stuff on computers. And I thought after that, well, wait a minute. Well, maybe I will be an artist because, and this is funny today, I said, computers will never take over art. It's like, okay. Now we have AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's particularly funny this year, right? Man.
It is. Yeah. But anyway, however that's going to happen. But yeah, I thought, computers will never, and again, since then, I've obviously come to enjoy computers. I mean, computers in that, into the 90s and stuff became so much user friendly, and we all use them today. We have what we have today. So that makes me kind of laugh that I was so scared of them back in 1983. So anyway, at that point, I decided, I'm going to be an artist. But the interesting thing about that is I had no support. I had no encouragement. And you'd say, well, your mom was an artist, but she didn't want me to. She was a hobbyist artist. She never sold her artwork, but she actually became quite, I'd say, I guess you can't say professional because she didn't sell her work, but she was very good. She wasn't the typical hobbyist amateur artist. Her work was really good. Vern Swanson for years was trying to steal some pieces from me for the museum down there, but I wouldn't let him have them. I won't part with them. So she became quite proficient. She was really good at it. But for her, it was a hobby, and she wanted me to go into computers. I think when I told her I wasn't going to be an architect, I think she was devastated. And I think the day I told her I wanted to be an artist, she just never quite could overcome that. My dad had passed away already. He would have probably insisted I didn't become an artist heavy-handedly or something. I don't know what would have happened, but other than maybe a friend or two in high school, I had no support. I had no encouragement. I had no financial support. I had no one saying, go for it, but I kind of did it anyway. And coming from kind of a poor family, and I was not, I didn't want to go to BYU. So the closest thing I thought was, well, the University of Utah. Maybe I shouldn't say, no, I don't care. Going to the university, I thought, hey, I'll go up there and go to art. And I
Yeah.
had no idea. I had no idea what I was in for. So I signed
Wait,
up.
so this would have been still around the 80s.
I worked for a while. So I'm sorry. Yeah, this would have been 1985. So my first year. So I spent a couple years actually. So I spent 1 year working in. I had just dead end jobs, and one day I thought, well, maybe I'll try to get a job in the art field. And down in Utah County, there are several fine arts bronze casting foundries down there. I don't know why there's so many down there. And I got a job at a fine arts bronze casting foundry, and I thought that was great because hey, I'm in the arts, but it's not. You're just a worker.
Yeah.
And so when I got into the University of Utah, I had to find a new job, in Salt Lake. So I heard that there was I didn't want to work in a commercial foundry. I wanted to be in the arts, and I'd heard of this artist up in South Jordan. His name was Edward J. Fraughton, and he had a foundry. And I went up, and long story short, I got a job working for him in his foundry. And the cool thing about his foundry is he wasn't commercial. It was just for him. It was just his foundry. We cast only his pieces, and and I'll get back to school here really quick, but in his foundry, he wanted to train the people that worked underneath him so that we knew, because he had used commercial foundries earlier on, and they just butchered his work. He just couldn't stand what they did, so he decided, I'm starting my own foundry, and I'm going to train my employees to work on my pieces the way I would. And so we got this slow kind of art education there with Ed, but it wasn't official. But anyway, so I got that job, was going to the University of Utah, and got immersed into that culture of, I think I've heard some of your other interviewers talk about university art education, and
But wasn't 1985 okay? Didn't they have some pretty good teachers back then?
Alvin Gittins was gone, so that was, I think if he'd been there,
he died in 79, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
no, I won't name any names, but it's gotten worse, I think.
Oh, it's gotten way worse. Yeah, way worse.
Yeah, so in hindsight, I probably should have, maybe I should have stuck it out, and maybe if I didn't learn the craft of art, I would have learned how to talk art, or maybe I would have learned something, but I was paying for it by myself. I had no financial support, and I was racking up. I had to work. I was racking up bills and stuff, and I just figured, I'm not going to pay for this. This is bullshit. Can I swear? Can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, that word's okay. I would say let's keep the F word out of it.
Okay. I'll try. I'll remember. You may
yeah, just do your best.
Okay. So this was bullshit. So I dropped out after about a year and a half. It just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. I tried 2D art, and that I wasn't happy. I did sculpture because I was at the foundry with Ed, and I thought, well, maybe sculpture. Department was even worse. I ended up in photography, which was even worse. That was the final straw. I was like, I've had enough of this crap.
Okay, this makes me curious. We can't just we got to talk about this for a minute, because I went to the University of Utah.
Okay, I was actually one question I have right here. It says, ask Jeff where he went to school, because you went to the University of Utah?
Yeah, but I went to Rick's College before it was BYU Idaho back in '92.
Right. Okay.
And then I went to then I had some crap happen. I had cancer, big stall. So it wasn't until 1997. I only went for 1 year at Rick's, and then 1997 I finally was ready to start going back to school again. I'd moved to Utah. I went to Salt Lake Community College. That was awesome. I studied with Rick Graham. Guy's good.
Rick's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, he's an amazing draftsman, great painter.
Oh my. Yeah.
And then I studied with Rob Adamson. I studied with George. I haven't heard about him much lately. He was a still life painter. And
I know who
he did these really beautiful still lifes, and they were kind of unfinished except where the focus was. And George, what was George's name?
What is his name? He's moved, and he moved out of Utah.
Is that why? Yeah, that's probably why I haven't heard about him. But so that was amazing. In 97, 98. I was there for 3 quarters. And then I'm gonna call out Rick Graham on here because I mean this is a compliment and a frustration because Rick Graham pulled me into his office one day and he said to me, this just goes to his humility. I think Rick Graham is amazing, but he said you're too good, too advanced for Salt Lake Community College. You need to go to the University of Utah. And that I wish I had stayed at Salt Lake Community College. I don't think he realized how good he is. I don't think he realized that his department was better.
He's humble. Yeah.
He's very humble, and I should have stayed there. I went to the University of Utah, and it was not anything like my experience at Salt Lake Community College.
Wow.
But I wasn't smart like you, and I didn't. I mean, I'm not saying I got nothing from it. I did. There were a few teachers that taught me some really great things, but as far as really learning the craft,
right,
that's where I didn't feel like there was some good drawing teachers there, but learning the craft of painting, I think, was where it really lacked.
It was, yeah. And I don't know if the same teachers were there when you were there, but the painting department, that's why I went to sculpture. I thought, well, this painting department's the pits. But you're right. There's a couple teachers. I think his name was, I don't know if he was there, Kleinschmidt.
No, he wasn't there when I was there.
So he had life drawing. The life drawing was great. And there's a couple other teachers that were good. So, that's kind of what I was saying. I think maybe it was smart probably to leave, but I should have probably tried a little harder. I mean, I could have taken printing classes, learned etching and things like that. It's like, why didn't I had the opportunity to learn more processes while I was there? I could have at least learned more, and then dropped out or something. But, I just was so hard-headed and naive and dumb. I just left,
But how did you know to leave? I went the entire 4 years. So I'd already been a year at Rick's, then I went a year at Salt Lake Community College. None of those credits transferred. So then I had to start from scratch.
You did the foundation.
Yeah. So then I did 4 more years. I have 6 years of training at universities and colleges.
Wow.
And then on the 4th year, I was two classes shy. I had a 1-man or 2-man show with another artist. And then I started selling paintings, and then I dropped out just because I didn't drop out. I just kept procrastinating going back because I was selling paintings. But I have 6 years and no degree, 6 years of school and no degree. But my point is, I was too stupid to drop out after year 1 or 2. How did you? I just assume that's what everyone does. You keep going. You just finish. You're not doing the right thing.
I think if I wasn't having to pay for every penny of college and working and racking up debt, I think that was stressing me out. Because the funny thing is, the foundation program is the hardest part. I mean, that's the part they're trying to weed students out. So it's like I made it through boot camp, and then I chickened out on the rest of it. I should have stayed and just see where that journey went. So I'm feeling kind of
no, you shouldn't have stayed.
I should have stayed.
You shouldn't have stayed. You did the right thing.
And the degree doesn't matter to me.
No.
I don't have a degree or anything, and that's never bothered me. But the funny thing, I think the other part of that is because I was working for Ed, and Ed had been at the University of Utah, and he had I'm not going to get into that, but he had his issues with them. So I was out working with him, and I think we had kind of a commonality, a common hate, dislike for the way the University of Utah is run. And I think I found kinship there with him and a few of the other employees. And we had our own little thing going there. And I did learn art from him. But again, I was an employee, and I worked for him for 15 years straight, full time. And then I went back for a better part of another year to help him on a gigantic project. So that is a long time to spin your wheels. I always think so another friend of ours, Corey, was, and we still have not pinned this down, but I think she was at the University of Utah around the same time I was, but we never met each other there. And so she has a similar story. She dropped out. I don't want to tell her story, but
yeah, I'm going to get her on here at some point.
I'm kind of, I know she's busy. She's probably kind of hard to wrangle, but she, she went to Italy. She went and she did, what she wanted to do. She got out of there and she went and she did that and got her education that way. And I, so I'm looking at like what I did, and I just stayed at the Foundry. And I think it was, it's easy to get a paycheck every week, and a little house, and I got married and started a family and stuff. But I'm thinking back, so that's the time of my life. I should have just, even if I wasn't in school, I should have figured something out to work harder at being an artist if that's what I had chosen to do. But I think I let working at the Foundry just kind of placate me a little bit, and just I was enjoying myself. I mean, it's a fun time of your life when you're young, but I wish I would have been more dedicated and tried to figure things out a little bit better. And sometimes I look at that from today's standards, because today we have online videos, we have schools, well, your school, there's schools everywhere, but in 19,
there
80s,
was
late,
nothing.
there was nothing. There was
Nothing,
nothing, I remember getting a video, a VHS, I was like, do we even remember what VHS is anymore, And it was a VHS that I borrowed from an art friend of John Howard Sandon painting a copy of a Sargent painting. And that was my first video I'd ever seen. And I thought it was amazing. That was amazing. But it was so hard to, you had to buy VHS videos out of Northlight magazines, Northlight. So you'd call them up on the phone, or you'd send your check into it and buy these videos for a couple $100 or whatever. And, it was such a different world back then. So I have to remember that sometimes, that it's, that not to look at that through today's lens of how easy and accessible art lessons, I guess, are. But I mean, at that time, I guess the thing I should remember is I was at least doing life drawing every week, once to twice a week. So
where were you doing that?
King's Cottage.
Really?
First, Earl Jones. So Earl Jones had his little session, and I'd go back and forth sometimes. I'd do it at Earl's. But I think I felt better at King's Cottage. I liked Susan, and we got along really well and stuff. So I was King's Cottage for 20 years. I was drawing at King's Cottage, and then of course later, within the past 5 or 6 years, I'm doing live sessions, drawing live sessions in my studio, and with Rick Graham and a few other friends, more of a closed group. So, I do have a fair amount, not as much as I should, of life drawing. So I was doing that. When I'm telling you I should have worked harder, I should have learned. When my brain was a sponge instead of a brick, that's when I should have been absorbing all of this information at a much faster pace than I was. But like I said, at least I was life drawing. So I do feel about that.
So did you seek out any of I call them the grandfathers of painting in Utah, like Bill Whitaker and Randall Lake? Did you seek out those two guys? Or there was Trevor Southey back then?
Oh yeah, Trevor.
Yeah.
I took a workshop from Randall Lake, but that was about it. I found Randall a little inaccessible sometimes, like, to kind of pick his brain a little bit.
Right.
We had mutual friends, and Susan Gallagher has a place in Spring City right next to Randall. So
yeah,
painted right there in Randall's little house down there. That was nice. Bill Whitaker, I got to know a little bit. And I don't know if he's of that generation, like Don Siegmiller do you know him?
I know his name.
He's not teaching at Slick, but he's very similar to Bill Whitaker, and they paint very similarly. So my mom took lessons from him, and so I got to meet him and learn a little bit from him. So he's kind of that, I think, a little bit younger than them, because let's see, Randall Lake's still around, but
Randall's still around.
Fun. So I missed because I like Casey Childs. He was able to study under Bill, and
a lot of people were.
A lot of
people were. Yeah. Good. So I wonder what your thoughts are about this, because if you start in 85, I didn't get to the University of Utah. Let me think. What was it? 98, I believe.
90. Oh wow. 98.
So 13 years later. Yeah, but I was old. I didn't start till I was like 24 or 5. I was a little older, so I'm not that. I mean, yeah. Anyway, but I developed a theory. I wonder what your thoughts are on it. Because I remember getting to Utah. I don't know anything about art. My story is so similar to yours, except I don't have an art parent. My dad was that
Really?
person. He could draw really well, and he was the mechanically inclined one. I mean, he and I have a
Oh, he
lot in
had
common.
both.
He had both, yeah.
Wow.
But he wasn't aesthetically. He didn't have a sense of aesthetics, so he wasn't artistic in that sense. But he could draw with. He could do anything with his hands. My dad could.
Hmm.
But my uncles were artists. My uncle is an artist. My cousin, Mark Pugh, I don't know if you know his work. He's an artist. There's a lot of art in my mom's side.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't know there was a relation.
But I got that's kind of a total tangent. But when I got to University of Utah, I found it kind of eventually found it kind of odd that back in the 70s, Alvin Gittins was there and Doug Snow and a few
That's
others.
yeah.
And they had it in the 70s when the whole country was like immersed in contemporary or modern art,
Yeah.
and realism was so unbelievably frowned on and unpopular. The University of Utah was this little tiny island where they had Alvin Gittins was considered one of the best portrait painters in the country, and he's right here
Yep.
in Utah.
Yep.
And then
Yeah.
he breeds like William Whitaker and
Randall Lake.
Randall Lake and a few others. I was Galina Prova. Did she study with him too?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then there
Oh,
was Sean Klinger. I can't remember. Anyway, so he created these great portrait painters and figurative painters. He had this posterity that followed him,
yeah.
and then the
Amazing.
University of Utah. Then he died, and the University of Utah slowly started to go more and more modern. And then in 2002, about the time I left, they changed their dean and it went completely modern. And they literally
Oh.
drove out all the realist teachers with the exception of one.
Oh. Wow.
And I was thinking, wait a minute, it's 2002. All these ateliers are starting to pop up. There's a new revival in
Yep.
realism.
Yeah.
We were like the mecca for realism in the 70s when it was totally uncool. Now it's becoming cool again. And we're going clear back to the early 1900s. Like, what is wrong with the University of Utah? Like,
I
I was
don't
like,
know.
but what's crazy is back in the 2000s, I left in 2002, and people were literally coming here scouting for artists. Went Gallery found me that way. They drove to Utah. They're looking
Oh,
around for artists because
really?
Utah had developed. I'm sure you know this. Utah had developed its reputation for having all these good
Incredible
painters,
artists.
incredible painters, particularly Utah
Yep.
County. And
Yep.
I was fortunate to kind of ride that wave. But here's my theory. So I honestly believe the reason why that is that Utah has all of these good artists in one place is because of Alvin Gittins, because he created this posterity through those other three or four artists or more, who then passed it down to people like Casey Childs and various others who are now passing it down. And it
Yep.
was like when everyone else was teaching modernism, Alvin Gittins was here creating this little stew of interest in realism in the 70s of all times. And I just,
Isn't that amazing?
isn't that something? But then, and then in 2002, they completely go backwards. I'm like, what? No, anyway, not backwards.
Well, and,
Like, I'm not
you know,
opposed to modernism. For all the people listening, I'm not opposed to
I was going
modernism.
to say the same thing
Yeah,
too. And
I love
I've come,
modernism.
I've come around a lot the
Yeah,
last few years. I was just thinking, like, Richard Diebenkorn. Did I say that right? Diebenkorn. I
yeah,
saw
sounds
his
right to me.
work uh, for the first time. That's right. For the first time, maybe 10 years ago, and I thought, I was like, it's modern. And then I saw it again maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I thought, oh my God, I love that. I love that. I love his work. So I've come around a lot. I don't. I don't. I appreciate modernism. I don't look down at it anymore. But like you said, isn't that interesting that there was such a dichotomy of almost like opposite what's happening in Utah versus the rest of the world and at that time period. And Alvin Gittins, I would love to have met him. Although I've heard stories that, you know, you had to have tough skin around him. Oh, he could be brutal,
That's what I've
but
heard.
he
Yeah.
demanded a lot of his students, you know. But I see watch videos and his accent, and I mean, it's like he's like the, you know, the next couple generations of Sargent, you know. Just he's a big man. He's smoking a cigar. He's painting, you know, and he's brilliant. But these are just rumors. But when I was there in '85, there was certain dissension among the ranks underneath him. They wanted to get rid of him.
I
And
heard
again,
that.
those are just rumors. I don't know what was really going on. But I think modernism was trying to push its way, and he was such a gregarious character. He was able to keep his thumb on it and do what he wanted to, which is interesting that they hired him in the first place. You know, I mean, somebody hired him at some point to come in and do that. But as his tenure advanced, there were, you know, again, I don't know who it was, teachers, dean, I don't know. They wanted him out. They wanted modernism to come back in a little bit stronger. So anyway,
Yeah.
he was the man. He was the guy.
Yeah, and I think we should let me look up Alvin Gittins here real quick for the viewers because this I think this is
You
a
know,
really good
you know,
conversation here.
you go out of Utah and you mention Alvin Gittins, and it's like, who?
No,
You
no,
know,
no one
who?
knows who he is.
Nobody knows who he is. But and I think there's it's a few years now, but I think they're supposed to be making a book on his art.
No kidding. Is that right?
Well, and I think Vern has something to do with it. Vern Swanson and a couple other artists are. I haven't seen it, or I don't know what's going on if it's still happening. But I just thought that'd be great to have a nice big book on all of his artwork.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
here's a
so
few of his paintings. Here's one here.
I love this. Oh, that's such an awesome painting. Look at the
Yeah.
stylization of those kids.
Yeah, that's
Look at that.
classic Alvin Gittins right there.
Isn't that awesome?
And look and they're dating it, right?
They are.
That's a
They
good
really.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I also want to pull up one thing to our point about modernism because I think you are on the same page. There's Doug Snow, who is
Yeah.
kind of a rock star here in Utah as well. He passed away
He did. Yes.
recently, not recently, a while ago. When did he pass away? I don't even know. It's been a while, right?
It's Yeah. You know, the years go by so fast now.
Yeah, but
Uh,
he was a landscape painter, modernist, but
yeah. Look at that. That's awesome.
he's freaking good. He was so good. I mean, that was a magical time there because they had Alvin Gittins and they had him who is just doing these incredible modern paintings that they just go beyond the sort of trite, predictable, ruffle
Yeah.
everyone's feathers, you know, low hanging
Yeah.
fruit subject matter kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, his stuff was awesome. Anyway, I just wanted to run that
Look.
by you as well because I've often thought about that, and knowing that you also went to the University of Utah and that you had a similar experience to me just made me kind of curious about that.
Yeah. There's a kinship there. You know, anybody who had to put up with that crap up there. You know.
Yeah, but I mean,
But yeah. You
I
know.
have to say though, I did have a couple of good teachers up there. John Erickson, he was a great teacher.
Yeah, he was there when I was there.
He
I
wasn't
don't
there.
think.
No.
Not Eric. No, I don't think so.
Oh yeah, he's a
I
good painter and great draftsman. Maureen O'Hara Yor was my teacher, and she changed my life in a way. I mean, she said to me once because I was showing off because I could draw well, and I was showing off, just trying to show everyone how well I could draw. And she pulled me aside and said, "Jeff," she said, "How does she put it?" She said, "Well, you need to stop showing off and start thinking
Really?
about what makes a portrait more than just a portrait." I will
Oh
never
wow.
forget that. That was worth the 4 years right there alone
Oh wow.
because I thought being an artist just meant drawing things to look like things. And then,
I use the term now rendering, and I don't mean to make
yeah,
rendering. It's not a negative term. It's just a term, but that's where I have, you know, like, well, I don't want to sidetrack you off that or anything, but I thought a lot about like what I missed or being self-taught. I don't know, maybe that's a bad term, self-directed. You know, not
yeah,
going to
yeah,
school. I've always felt like I missed out. You have this thing in the back of your head. I missed out on something. I missed out on something. I'm watching people who have had education doing something, and I was like, I missed out on something, which I don't know if it's true because I've discussed this with friends about, there's always good things and bad things about education versus doing it yourself. We can get into that later, but just what you said right there, she gave you that tidbit of information that I just picked up in the last few years, and I'll say within the last 5 or 6, 7 years, and starting to realize that I don't any longer want to. And again, I'll use the term render. I don't mean it negatively. Rendering's fine. I don't want to render, but my whole life was there's the reference, and it doesn't matter if it's a photo or it's from life. And my job, and you do that but I think I was beyond a student. Well, no, I'm still a student. I don't know what I am. But
I know, isn't it hard to define yourself?
It's weird, yeah. But at some point, you're supposed to you're always learning. Okay,
right.
You're always learning. That's my number one goal. But at some point, you're not a student anymore, and you're supposed to be developing what this means to you. And so I'm no longer interested in rendering that. Like, I don't want that to look exactly like that reference. I want to find what it means to me. And so that's but now I'm 57 years old, and you learned that lesson, and you said you never forgot it.
No. I was taught that lesson.
You were taught.
I am still struggling with it.
Oh, that makes me feel a little better.
No, I haven't mastered it.
I'm struggling so hard with that. I mean, it's almost incapacitating sometimes. And I come up into the studio and whatever reference it is, and I start working on it. And this sounds funny because, and I couldn't even say this to myself for a long time, but I think it's true. I get bored. I'm bored. I realize that's what's happening when I take it off and I don't want to work on it anymore. But the weird thing about when I say I'm bored, to me, and I think a lot of people, that would almost sound like this arrogance of oh, I'm so good. I've mastered this all, and now I'm bored. But the truth of the matter is, I've not mastered anything.
I know.
It's still a struggle, but I had to admit to myself, well, wait a minute, Bryce. Just listen to yourself. If you're bored, why are you bored? You're still struggling to make it. It's harder than hell, to draw a figure, to draw a tree or paint or whatever you're doing. It's full concentration. It's difficult, but why are you bored? And that is the answer right there. The boredom was because I need to somehow figure out what it means to me to how do you make that more than just a picture or a painting or a drawing of the subject? What can you breathe into that? What life can you put into that? What does it mean to me to do that? And that's hard. I don't have the answer. I wish I could say okay, everybody, I'm going to give everyone the answer here in 5 minutes. Hold on. I don't have the answer. And
yes, you do. Yes, you do, Bryce. Okay, so here, this is funny because you just said, oh, it's so great you've learned that, and you're 10 years younger than me. I'm like, no, I haven't. And then you say, you don't think you've learned it. I was literally drawing the other day in my sketchbook, and you and your work came to my mind, and I thought to myself,
oh, God.
No, I'm not kidding. I swear to you. And I'm like, oh, God, my work is not art. How do I make it art like Bryce does? And yeah, I can make anyone look like themselves, right? But it's so hard to make it look like art. I look at your work, and it is just you, and we're going to look at your work in a bit, and I'm going to explain why I think that's the case and want you to comment on it. But I just have to extend that compliment to you because I think you have learned it.
Isn't that interesting how we are our own worst critics?
Yeah, you think I figured it out. I think you figured it out. And it's ridiculous. It's so sad. Why can't we just love our own work? Oh, man.
Because then we wouldn't improve.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Younger artists, I want a little advice. And it's always there's a fine line. If you love your work too much, you won't grow. If you hate your work, if you hate yourself and you hate your work so much, you'll stop because it's too painful. So you have to find a balance. You have to love yourself just enough to keep yourself going and hate yourself enough to improve.
That's
and to
very
say,
true.
yeah,
That's very
the
true.
next one will be better. I will do better on the next one. This one was, wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Put it aside, do the next one. The next one's always better. There's that cliche of, what's your best, somebody asks the artist, what's your favorite or what's your best piece? And the artist says, the next one,
Yeah.
one I haven't done.
Yeah, the one in
It's so
here.
true.
It's perfect in here.
It's
Perfect.
perfect. It's always perfect in here.
Yeah.
Okay, I learned this stupid thing at the University of Utah, and I don't remember what professor it was. It might have been, and actually I like David Dornan. I don't know if Dave Dornan
That's
was there.
what
He
I'm
was
saying.
actually,
I thought you had good teachers during that time.
he was a good teacher.
Didn't you have David Dornan and then Smith? A guy named Smith? I can't remember his first name. Guess you didn't have him.
No, I did. I'm not going to comment.
Oh, so it wasn't good. See, I never had it. I never had him. I don't know. Because he was before me. He had retired before when I got there, but he was a legend. Everyone was like, oh, you missed out. You missed out.
He is a legend. But no, I think Dave liked teaching still. I think that let's just put it that. I think some of the teachers up there their egos were so huge and they had such a tenured position. They had no real desire to teach. And I think Dave still had the desire to teach. And so he said something, I'll paraphrase, the image is in your head and it's perfect, but by the time it gets to your hand, it leaks out your elbow. And I thought, that's funny.
That is funny.
That, Dave. So I've remembered that my whole life.
Yeah, that is funny. So I want to dive a little deeper on this attitude toward modernism because I've got a little pushback on the podcast. Because
really?
Well, a little bit. I mean, I think it's been well received for the most part. Well, it's definitely been well received for the most part. I'm really grateful for all the people who listen. But this whole idea of modernism. Well, I want to know more about your thoughts on it. What do you feel like? What do you feel like you wanted to get out of school that this period wasn't giving you? And I'm not trying to direct you by starting with this whole thing on modernism. Don't. I mean, maybe I said the question all wrong. Let me rephrase it. Just simply, what were you trying to get out of school that you felt like school wasn't offering you?
Okay. No, I think, let's see if I can touch on that really quick. I think, so I'll go even back to back to high school. Obviously, we're in Utah. Oh, no, because you said, modernism, it's an interesting state. There's modernism and there's realism. It exists here and it's kind of its own iteration. It's its own little stewing pot all on its own, kind of isolated here. So it was around, but I think most of the people, like my mom and her teachers, Bill Whitaker, were realists. But I know, a lot of people will say, well, what got you really fired up to be an artist? And I do remember my art teacher in high school had a book on N.C. Wyeth and Andrew Wyeth. And I remember looking at that N.C. Wyeth book and was just spellbound by, that was my first introduction to N.C. Wyeth. Could not get enough of him. And, again, there was no internet. There was this one old crappy book. I have it, and it's just full of black and white. But I started my introduction into those early American illustrators. And, Howard Pyle, N.C. Wyeth, Norman Rockwell. And that's what fired me up. So I get to the University of Utah. So I guess the one question I wanted to say on the University of Utah, it didn't have anything to do with realism versus modernism. It was just simply, I wanted to learn the craft of making art, And we did learn some, we talked about that, but it just seemed to be so much about the politics and the feeling. I didn't feel like I was getting the education, the physical education that I set out to get. I wanted to learn how to draw the figure. I wanted to learn how to do this and that and that. And I just felt like it was just the wrong direction. So at that point, I wasn't really thinking about that. But it was when I got up there, I made the mistake at one point of mentioning, hell, I think I even mentioned Rembrandt once to somebody. And they said, oh, Rembrandt. Oh,
no, really?
Yeah, Rembrandt. I'm like, oh, and I was super impressionable and naive. I don't know, and, God forbid you can mention NC and they're like, oh, no. And then it gets worse, don't dare mention Norman Rockwell. Oh, I remember diatribes that some of those teachers up there would say about the lowly illustrator, the lowly, Norman Rockwell, he was just an illustrator. And that there was a dissonance going on in my head. Like, I don't understand this. I thought they were great artists, So I was really, it just confused me. It confused the hell out of me. So they're throwing these artists out that I'd never, like Rothko and I can't think of a lot of their names. And I was like, I just wasn't willing to, I was entrenched in my half of traditionalism. I was not interested. And that was just this big dissonance between me and them. Now, when I went to work for Ed Broughton, he loves, he doesn't care for modernism at all. Again, I think I've kind of come around to a little bit. I can appreciate both now, but he loved Norman Rockwell. There was a show, almost seems like you had somebody on your podcast. Maybe you talked about this. We had a show with Norman Rockwell here in Utah.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was like 15 years ago.
And got to see that. I was blown away by that. Oh my God, that was beautiful.
The one at BYU.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And then recently, just within the last few years, there was another small show of his paintings, and I just couldn't get over how painterly they were. They were beautiful. I mean, that guy was. And so anybody who could, poo-poo Norman Rockwell because he was a lowly illustrator, I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're so close-minded, And then on the other hand, now I feel better too because I don't feel like I'm closed-minded. On the other side, I feel like I'm a lot more open-minded now about that. So I think that was just that dissonance of confusion that I was getting. And again, I wanted the physical education. Like if I could have found an atelier where they sat my ass down and said, you're going to draw this cast and you're going to do it and you're going to do that cast and you can do it again and again and again, until you learn how to draw. I think that's what I was looking for. And I didn't get it.
I want to show you another artist. Okay, so Barnett Newman. Have you heard of Barnett Newman?
Barnett Newman. I don't think so.
When I tell you this, you're going to be like, what? Okay, so Barnett Newman was, I think you mentioned Vern Swanson. He's a historian, great guy here in Utah who's had a huge influence on the art world here in Utah. But he called him once a classical modernist because he uses sort of abstract, very clean abstract shapes. This isn't the actual painting that I saw, but so this is Barnett Newman. Okay. So when I was at the University of Utah, I had visited, when I was studying there, I had visited a museum back east. I'm from New York. I don't know if you knew that, but I'd gone back home. Yeah. So I'd gone back home and I visited a museum. Yeah. And I saw a painting like this. He paints these huge paintings with these just blank fields, and you can see them in the thumbnails. They're just these blank fields of color, but they're often enormous. I mean, the one I remember seeing was something like 12 feet tall, and I was genuinely moved by it. Okay. And this is when I'm at the same time that I'm really frustrated at the University of Utah because I'm not learning technique. So the problem was, though, I go back to school and I don't need to know how to paint that. Right. All I need to go to a hardware store and buy a roller. And they're not going to be able to teach me to be Barnett Newman because Barnett Newman is only Barnett Newman. I can't be Barnett Newman. There's no curriculum that's going to teach me to think like him. And if it did, it would be a disservice to me because he already exists. Right. So what I was after when I was in school was just teach me how to paint. Right. Don't tell me how to think. And that's the modernist mentality in schools that I push against, right? It's not that I'm opposed to modernists. I love modernists. I've had some on my podcast. My favorite painter, probably my number one, I hope I don't embarrass her, is Leah Chapin. She might be my favorite painter right now. And she is really modern. Oh man, her stuff is so cool. But don't teach me that at school. Leah already exists.
Right.
Teach me how to paint the faces she paints. And then maybe if I'm lucky, I'll be able to come up with something as creative as her once I know the technique to have how to paint things.
Like this attitude, this uh, been going on forever with artists that learn your craft first. I guess you could take in Picasso as an example. You know, we all know he started off as a realist, and then he changed. He went and did his modern work that we know him for. But it's like he knew how to draw. He knew what to do in the beginning. So he was trained. And then he decided to do this. So it still seems to me like, even if you're going to be a modernist, it seems like, oh, you know, it's like making a mistake in art. You know, like the beginner that makes the mistake, they don't understand they're making a mistake. But later, as a trained artist, you make the mistake on purpose, or you're changing something on purpose because you know the rules and you're breaking the rules. And so it's kind of like that idea. So it's like, even in a modernist school, for hell's sakes, teach people how to draw, and then maybe in graduate school or something, and then you can maybe like teach them how to think different, or about, I don't know,
or just let them think different, then let them run. Then let them run with it. Yeah.
There's gotta be a better way than what they're doing. So I don't know. Yeah.
An analogy I often use with my students is, if I wanted to be a poet, and then one of the most important things is I need to know the language first that I'm going to write poetry in, and I probably should have a decent vocabulary, right? And if this is, of course, before AI, now anyone can do it. But and then I have to have a decent vocabulary, and then and then I'm not going to be limited on what I can say, because I have language. I have language skills. And now, if I have a creative soul with that language skill that I can be taught, now I can express myself however I want. I can even write a poem like a babbling idiot and throw out all the intellectual words, all the sophisticated, all the fancy words, and throw them all out just so I sound like a babbling idiot, for the sake of saying something in that poem, if I choose to. And then a poem with a low vocabulary is that much more powerful because it was a choice. Right. You know, that's the way I look at it. That's the way I look at it. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah, I guess, you know, like musicians, it's a similar analogy. Or you could even take it a jazz musician. I'm not a huge jazz fan, but I know, you know, jazz, sometimes they just go off and they're just playing notes and tunes just on the fly. But they have a real solid background in music to be able to do that. You can't just start off doing that. It's just not going to be right. So you have to have that vocabulary. You have to have the tools to know how to do that. So, yeah.
But on the flip side, you and I are both struggling with hanging too tight to the vocabulary, right? So that's the flip side. That's the danger of it. That's the I mean, and therein lies the dichotomy, or the contradiction. And it's like, what do you do once you have the vocabulary? So maybe I'll give this to you as a question. What are you doing? Because I believe you have a huge artistic vocabulary.
Wow.
So what are you doing? What are you doing to make an effort to? I realize you're your own worst critic and you don't think you're doing it, but what are your attempts in your mind at trying to go above beyond vocabulary and be expressive?
You know, that's a good question. You know, because I'm still trying to figure that out, so it's kind of hard to like step back and see it as you're in it. But you know, maybe on the first context, and not having learned this before, is like, I think all good art, no matter what its finish is or how realistic, it's kind of based in abstract theories. You know, like shapes. You know, and value, you know, grouping your values together and doing geometric shapes. That's just this basic abstract principle. So I've really honed in on those on my work, and kind of seeing, you know, how much stronger. See, again, I should have learned that, you know, 30 years ago, but here I am. I'm picking that up later in life. You know, I mean, maybe I was doing it, but I was doing it a little bit more. I wasn't aware of it. But so, you know, taking those principles and then looking at, like I said, Richard Diebenkorn, I adore when I see it on Instagram, and then it's a Diebenkorn Foundation. They have wonderful dialogue underneath that talks about his thought processes and things that people said about him and stuff. It's brilliant. I enjoy seeing on his page, you know, what pops up, and I'm following a few other more modern abstract painters and stuff, and I'm trying to just pull some of that into my subconscious a little bit. So I'm in this battle. So how do you take? I don't necessarily want to, although I'm playing a little bit with it behind the scenes, just abstracts, just doing pure abstracts, just trying to teach myself to pull away from the literal object and just try to, sounds funny, access my feelings.
Yeah.
Which is hard because, it's usually that drive in me of like, ooh, I got to get that nose, I got to get those lips, I got to get that eye or whatever. You've got that object you're trying to render or whatever. So it's hard to like, ooh, I don't have feelings. I don't know. And I've said this, like, it's like driving on a dark road at night with your lights off, going 60 miles an hour. You don't know where the hell you're going, but it's kind of fun. It's kind of exhilarating, it's just kind of scary. So I'm trying to access that. And then over here I have realism. So I have this, what I've always done, this realism, this abstract. So I'm like, how in the hell, can I say hell?
Yeah.
Sorry. How in the hell am I going to get those blended together somehow? And I think I have a bad tendency to overthink. I'm one of those, overthinkers. And, it's not, I just need to work more. I mean, that sounds stupid. That sounds like, yeah, duh, you need to work more. But I think about it a lot, and I do little studies and stuff like that. But I need to just set a goal, and I need to get in and start doing it. And I realized that my first few attempts, well, I've got a few, and I actually like kind of where they're going. It's fine if they're more realistic. I think just that they're realistic and they're tight, as long as I'm trying, as long as I'm allowing that expression, that abstraction, that other half that of my brain, my creativity, my imagination that I have never really developed all that much. As long as I think I'm trying to access it and realizing, like, kind of think of creativity as, I think there's a quote by somebody that talks about the creativity isn't something you use up. The more you use it, the more you have. And so it's like,
yeah, it's totally true.
Accessing this creativity, so imagination into creativity, and trying to just realize that it's there. I just haven't really accessed it all those years. I've just been trying to just, copy things or make things look real. And so I know it's going to be slow. And it's like, okay, Bryce, just give yourself, stop overthinking everything and just start doing these. And so what's driving me, I think, with this is multi-figural. So more than one figure. I have a really hard time accessing it when I have just one figure on the canvas. Actually, I think I can access it better when I'm doing a little landscape or something. I posted one today about the landscape I did recently versus one I did a few years ago, and there's just a big difference in them.
Wait a minute. Let's look at that. Let's look at your post.
It's just a little study, So
right. So this is today.
Just simplify. Yeah, I just posted it today. I just simplifying that versus one I did in 2020, which is just a little broken up, and I was trying to get that thing more realistic, and I'm standing in almost the same spot, not quite, but very, very close. And just a difference in seeing things in a simplified manner, and I'm seeing these geometric shapes and these grouping of values, and anyway, I can see that easier when I'm doing something like a landscape because it is kind of abstract. But when I'm doing a figure, I still is like, ooh, that's a figure. That's still a single figure. But now I get two figures in together, and I've been working with models who are posing together, and I begin to notice and I'm usually up on a ladder. Most of these I'm up on a ladder, and so I'm looking down. And if you can change your perspective, we all know this. This is just preaching to the choir. Change your perspective, and now you got two models, and some are female, and some are male and female together in an intertwined shape. It's a shape. The shapes become so abstract, and you squint that down, you think, oh wow, that's just a bunch of triangles, rectangles, and then the light patterns are making. So I'm seeing all these abstract things, and that's what's kind of, I think, engaging that part of my brain that kind of exciting me to see where this goes. So I keep saying, like, I think, in my head, I see something, but it's not coming out on the canvas right. So I just got to give myself a little space and say, look, just start doing it more. They look realistic, it's fine. But as long as that principle of abstraction is in your subconscious, they will begin to develop more and more the direction I want them to go. So,
okay, so one thing I found in my work, and this kind of goes to what we were talking about earlier, where both of us feel like we're struggling to not just render, right? Is abstract painting is actually really hard.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
It's really hard.
It's a lot harder than you think,
Yeah.
Because you do look at something like that and you think like, oh, I could do that. And you sit down and do it and you're like, I'm so lost. I don't know how to do this. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, I do believe that anyone can accidentally do a good abstract painting, accidentally on occasion. I remember once I was sitting in someone's room, they had this old house and there was a door they had started stripping the paint on. And there was all these layers of paint revealed, and I took a picture of it, and it was like the most beautiful abstract painting. It just kind of happened on accident. And I don't believe you can accidentally do a Rembrandt, right? But that said, it's still hard. And the reason I think it's hard, and I'd love for you to comment on this, is because there's no objective way to measure success. And so you might think it looks good, but what? And sometimes that is even hard. That's even hard to get to a place where you are sure it looks good. And then you have to ask the question, does everyone else, are my viewers going to feel what I'm feeling now? What are your thoughts on that when you're trying to think more abstractly?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I think you hit it though when you said you could do one accidentally here and there. And I think the people I follow online, they're pretty consistent. They have a look. It's interesting that there's no objectiveness. There's no objects in it. It's pure abstraction, yet I can pick them out. I can pick out, I can't off the top of my mind think who they are. I think there's a couple Canadians in there. And they're similar. They really have a similar look, but I can pick them out. I can see, oh, yeah, that's her work. That's his, without reading who it is and stuff. So there's a signature to it. They're doing something, they're accessing something that's coming from somewhere. And so, yeah, how do you consistently, I'm sure to them, probably they're not all successes. Maybe they're just, showing the ones they feel like are, but there's a lot of them. So they have a body of work. And like, how would you make a body of work? I think that's very difficult. I don't know if that answered your question. I think that's something I probably need to think about a little bit more.
Well, I think your answer is an answer and a non-answer at the same time. You're basically agreeing that you don't know either, is what I'm hearing. And maybe that's the struggle of being an artist, is maybe trying to figure that stuff out.
I always have lots and lots of questions, but I have few answers.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at your work now a little bit. Well, I think I want to go to Instagram first.
I think you were talking to Katie Whipple, or I watched Katie. I want to tell you too. I've watched your Martin Campos video twice now.
Oh, I was going to ask you about Martin Campos because you guys seem sort of like you have similar tastes. Well, similar, not exact, but
yeah. Oh, well, nobody can. Oh, where does Martin pull that from? It's amazing. I was going to say that one more thing about like the abstract. It's not all on my own. I mean, I give Martin some credit when you're seeing Martin pull up these, he's working on these figures and he's pulling up these abstract shapes out of them. That's percolating in my head. I really respond to what he's doing. I really like Martin. I think he's just the nicest person in the world.
Oh yeah, his work is so incredible. I own one of his drawings. It's one of my favorite.
Me too. I've got a little drawing.
Yeah,
I'd like to see it when we should get together and show it.
Yeah, I'll show you. Well, if you come to the studio, I'll show it to you. But he is another great example. I already mentioned Leah Chapin. I've interviewed Zoe Frank. He's another great example.
I just started your interview with Zoe.
Yeah, there's a bunch, and that really are masters at balancing the ability to render, as you put it, and absolute control of abstract shapes and forms. And
yeah, I think Zoe's work. I was going to mention her earlier. I don't know how she does that. I mean, I'm looking forward to that interview. It's just amazing how she can put all that stuff together and come up with such a cohesive, I don't even have the right dialogue for it, but it's beautiful.
It is. And it is incredible. All right. Well, let's look at a couple. I'm going to pull up a couple of my favorites. Like I just saw this one today. I don't know why it didn't come up on
Oh,
my feed, but it is gorgeous.
thank you. Yeah,
Absolutely gorgeous. Tell me,
I,
okay, so let me
I
point
would.
out a couple things first before one of the things I love that you do is, well, first of all, we're all taught in art school, or we're all taught by our realist teachers, right? There are no lines. There are just
Right,
shapes and
right.
edges, right?
Yeah,
But then the really great draftsmen of the world really exploit line, in my opinion. I mean, you go back to the Renaissance and you
yep,
look at a great Michelangelo drawing, and it's just like the lines are what make it. And
yep.
you have that. And sometimes, and you really push color sometimes in your contours, which I think adds a lot to your work. Can you talk about that a little
Hey,
bit?
geez. I mean, like the line too. I would bring up those illustrators, early American illustrators, using the amount of line and the control of line was phenomenal to get to draw your eye where you wanted to go. And I feel like I should have been pushing that more. I think it's exactly what you said when I was. I guess we didn't really talk about this, but when I was in galleries, when I had my work in galleries, I was always feeling like it's got to look real, it's got to look real. And so I didn't allow myself to play with the concept of line. And so I pulled out of all my galleries. And so I'm not in any galleries right now. And so everything I'm doing is just are these small pieces and line. Again, if you go back to the illustrators, like I wanted to play with line a little bit more. So he is kind of more experimental, and I'm not thinking too much about it. I'm just kind of letting it happen. And I'm actually seeing it in a lot of other artists' work, and I'm wondering. I think we're all connected out there to a certain degree. There's some weird connection we all have, and or maybe we see it in one artist's work and we think, "Oh, that's a great idea." Like Scott Burdick, I've been noticing Scott. He's always had some kind of like cool line work, but he's really pushing his line work, and I've noticed that. It's like, oh, Scott's doing it too. Like, huh, that's interesting. Um, so anyway, yeah, just the other thing I wanted to do was really pushing like the color notes, like tonalism, I guess, or I guess it's kind of a little bit of an analogous feel, and changing. There's that abstractness a little bit, like, well, let's get away from what skin really looks like, and let's see what it would look like as if it was in this tone. And so that's just I did a few of these, and this one was the most successful. This one came out really, I don't know how it came out so nice, but it just seemed to work. It just seemed to, just
Yeah,
was one of the worked.
it really did. So tell me about your process when you are doing a drawing that's based on a particular color or a painting that's based on a particular color.
Mm-hmm.
Are you kind of looking at from life or from the photo at an actual person in natural color and then it kind of improvising on the fly, or is there some preliminary process that you're doing?
I would love to say yes. Oh yeah, I'm interpreting that all in my head, and I do actually still do that because I don't want to rely on a filter to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
But I will run it through. Like if I'm starting off, and I'll just say like I was going to do a series, and I thought let's do a series of that's Thalo actually, and it's like, well, first of all, let's learn to harness Thalo a little bit better. I love its color, and I love that just you get that blue green color. So I thought, well, let's just do a series of figures that are all going to have kind of that same tone, and I'm trying to interpret that in my head. But when I struggle, I will go into Photoshop and throw a filter over it, and I find that very helpful. Actually, you know, I've always been, I've never had a problem with using photos. You mentioned this several times on your podcast. It's a tool. It's a
Mm-hmm.
tool,
Mm-hmm.
just like anything else. But you don't want to abuse it. You don't. You want to have full command, I guess. Life drawing, photos, whatever. And I feel like maybe using Photoshop filters could be that same thing. You could become very reliant on that. And if you can translate that in your head, I think it's better. So, but I am still relying on some filters to help me interpret that, because it's kind of strange for me. I've not done a lot of that, but
Yeah, but the filters can't be making it look exactly like this, because a
no,
filter, yeah, because you must be changing,
yeah,
you know, say your reflected light colors and so on and so forth. A
yeah. The
filter,
filter just throws like one color over the whole thing,
right,
And I
right.
think that's a good one though. It kind of throws out the reality. It's no longer flesh; it's this abstract. You're focusing on the shapes, and then I'm probably going in kind of, I don't remember specifically, but just, using slight analogous color transitions and, my knowledge base of where I want to put warmer colors and cooler colors, and trying to make it a little less one dimensional in that regard, and trying to give it a little more breadth of richness, in tone.
So when you draw it, so this is a phthalo painting. Obviously, there are lots of violets and stuff in it too, but they're harmonious with the phthalo. But you chose a red line. And so tell me a little bit about that. Are you thinking, okay, red is the complement of green, I'm just going to go with
I,
that? Or is it somewhat arbitrary?
I think it was, as far as I recall, I think it was somewhat arbitrary. I think it was, I'm working with that analogous palette, and it was probably there. I don't remember. I don't remember, but it worked, didn't it? I
You
was like,
sure
oh, hey,
did.
it worked. Oh, but I think it was it could have been a happy accident.
Oh,
I
really?
may have put the end and said like, oh, hey, that really worked, and I'm going to run with that. Or I may have tried a phthalo first and thought, no, that didn't work. So probably a little bit of experimentation there. But so yeah, a lot of times, like, you'll do something, but you didn't realize you did it. We're not thinking consciously about it. It could have been a subconscious thing, pulling that out. I don't know. I don't know,
Although
but
the
it did.
leaving it is where the art is, right? Because if it
It,
was wrong, if it didn't work, you would have changed it.
yeah, right. And I think that's how I came about that. Is like I probably did it wrong a few times. Like, oh, hey, that color, that intensity, that worked. Like, well, why didn't I think of that? Sort of thing. So
Well, I particularly love it around the feet, where the feet are really unfinished and you just have these few little accents. Plus, I feel like it
thanks.
works really well because the flesh is much warmer than the background, and
Hmm.
it just feels like almost like the inside of an ear, like the flesh is
Oh,
kind of bouncing warmth
that's
around.
an interesting analogy. I like that. Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that went to a very dear friend of mine, local here. I don't know if I should mention who owns that, but
Well, if I'm gonna
it's.
steal it, I need to know, and just email me their address. Yeah, 'cause I'm sad it's sold, dang it. All right, so let's look at some of your, well, no, actually, I want to look at this first. Man, that
Oh,
is too
it,
cool. So tell me about this. Is this a life study from a photo
no, that was
study?
a photo. No, and
Okay.
since I still do life drawing, but since COVID, and again, since I'm trying to translate maybe more abstract, I'm using more photos than I think. Well, I've always used photos, but a lot of this is from photo. I don't know if there's a lot of life work up on here lately, but yeah, photo. And this was actually, so I started using golden open acrylics, and this
Oh,
was
this
one of
is
my first
that?
forays into golden open acrylics. And I started using open acrylics because of Rick Graham. And Rick can make them sing. I was like, I've watched him work with those for years and think, how does he do that? Oh, they're gorgeous. So I struggled with them a
Huh.
little bit, and but I kind of wanted something that was. It's why I draw a lot. I call it less committal. Like, maybe you're in the same boat. Like if you're going to do oil, you've got to commit yourself to a certain amount of time. There is going to be cleanup. There's going to be mess. There's going to be like an hour of brush cleaning at the end. And with drawing, so it's like you pick up a burnt stick of wood and you draw with it, and when you're done, you leave. And I
Okay,
thought I want
okay,
to do something.
okay. I got to stop you there. You really clean your
Okay,
brushes every time you paint?
no, I used to.
No.
I found I found ways around it.
Oh, you
Like
have?
I Yeah, I mean, I've gone through so many different processes, but like when I'm working on a piece and I'm going to use the same brushes, I'll just kind of wipe them out, stick them in the freezer, and then pull them out the next day. So,
Oh, you
but
know what I do? And I'm telling you, not just for you, but for the audience. I
would
go
love to know.
months and months and months without cleaning brushes. And
Do you?
I put them in mineral oil every night.
Oh, okay. And so you leave them in the mineral oil,
Yeah, it's just
like
like a
over.
flat tray so the
Yeah,
bristles don't bend, you know, and they just sit there and I'll have piles and piles of brushes in a pool of mineral oil for months and months and
yeah.
months. And the only reason I ever clean them is because the pile gets so big that I can't find brushes anymore. So then I'll just clean like 50 brushes and then put them all back and start
Oh,
fresh.
it's real. I know that process, and I really should do it. I've seen quite a few artists that will do that and just say, just leave them in the oil. They don't oxidize in the oil. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just have a habit of. I mean, in years past, I would just run through mineral spirits and call it good. And I ruined so many of my brushes by
Oh,
doing
it
that. So
kills them. It's like washing your hair
it's
with
just,
mineral spirits.
oh yeah, I'm trying to get away from mineral spirits and anyway, so yeah, that's like it's like having a water-based medium. So I'm not a big fan of acrylic just because they dry so bloody fast. It's like, I mean, you go back to that pile you just made on your palette and it's already dry. Oh, got to mix that again. So when I'm watching Rick do these and thinking, well, they're open, they stay wet longer, and so it gives you a little time to
How
blend.
long?
It really depends on the temperature, the ambient temperature of your room, and by how much water and or there's mediums that golden makes. So if you keep them a little bit more wet, misted, have a mister handy, you can keep them open for 2 or 3 hours.
Really?
Easy, yeah. But you got to remember, somebody just asked me, one of my friends asked me about them online, and I said, you do have to remember though that yes, they are blendable, but they are not oil. So you don't have the oil. If you're thinking they're going to be like oils, they're not because it's water based, and so they have a sticky feel to them a little bit. Like they will move, but they don't want to. But like with oil, I mean, we know what oil does. It just is so conducive to moving paint around for however long you want it to. So it's still its own beast to paint with, but
Hmm.
I think it's been, I'm trying to like with like seeing what Martin does. I've been trying to like pastel. I'm not a big pastels haven't been my friend, but I'm
Hmm.
trying because I thought, well, that's a quick and easy medium that gives you color. And then I thought, well, here's a quick and easy medium that just doesn't require lots of. You just, you can paint with it. There's no solvent. You rinse your brushes out in water and you're done. And so I've actually kind of like that. I actually like this medium a lot.
Okay, but what about the values? Do they change like traditional acrylics?
They do darken. Yeah,
Oh,
I
I
haven't
hate
overcome
that.
that. Don't
Yeah.
hate that. I just, yeah, you mix something up and it darkens and you come back to fix it. And, I know artists that do work in acrylic and I've asked them that and they says, just over the years, you just learn how to compensate for that. But I still struggle with that. Yeah, I wish they wouldn't darken.
Hmm. Yeah, because I like gouache. Well, I have a love-hate
Oh, gosh,
relationship with gouache, but because the hate part is the values.
yeah,
I don't do it enough to really be
I think
able
that's,
to figure out
yeah.
how to compensate yet.
I think that's just it. Just more. I mean, we need another lifetime to come back and learn how to do gouache and acrylic. And so but you just enough mileage in there to know what you need to do to compensate for it. So,
Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with James Gurney's work.
oh yeah,
Yes,
geez.
he knows how to use gouache. Holy moly.
Oh, he does, doesn't he? That guy can do anything. He's amazing.
Yeah, he really is. All right, so let me see what else. We'll pull up some of your drawings here. God, yeah, it's just your line work is just extraordinary.
Hmm,
So tell
thanks.
me a little bit about. I mean, sometimes I see something and it's so foreign to me, I almost don't know what to ask. Tell me about your process from start to finish. I mean, I don't need a whole book, obviously, right? But
Got 2 hours?
what is what so let me tell you my process real quick to maybe give
Okay.
you an idea of what I'm looking for. I tend to work more in shape
Hmm.
and with the figure more line because the figure is more linear in a way because it's got
Yeah.
limbs and fingers and
Yep.
right. But particularly with the face, I tend to focus more on shape and use line later and then
Oh,
and then I use line and value almost simultaneously, but I lay out proportions with shape. What is your approach to this?
that I want to throw this in really quick too. I'm actually just going to go back really quick to something you said about like when you're
Okay.
trying to figure out a figure. You brought my pieces up to look at them.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that I downloaded a bunch of your it was your pen work and some pencil work from your sketchbooks of your portraits,
Oh,
because I've almost always worked with a figure, and I feel a little more naive when it comes to the face, and I've been trying to work on faces more, especially since Instagram is so anti-figure. I mean, any nudity, they definitely curtail it. So it's like, well, geez, I want my account to grow. I've got to do more faces and teaching faces. And anyway, pulled up yours the other day to try to copy them and try to see how you're seeing this, because I think those ones, they're beautiful, and you've been putting them in a sketch pad, and I love your line work, and you're working with
oh man, that means a lot.
Well,
why don't we just
do
trade bodies for a couple of weeks and see? Because I'll take
Okay.
your drawing any day.
All right, let's do that. But it's funny. So so I have the figure, and then I'm kind of coming back saying, okay, let's spend more time on the face. And I have been trying to draw the face for months, and I'm struggling with, especially if you're trying to get it to look like somebody. I had thrown away so many portrait drawings that I can't even tell you. And it wasn't just till the other day I thought, well, wait a minute, why don't I try blocking in first with value? And this is so stupid. It was so much easier. Like, oh my God, why didn't you
So you
tell me
are
that?
thinking more linear because you're used to doing the figure. Yeah, for me, I have to go back and forth. I can't treat the figure the way I treat the face.
I'm just realizing, when I do a face, Bryce, you got to block it in. When you're doing the figure, you don't need to block it in. So, but the funny thing is, like, all those years of life drawing, I did block in, and I think this is weird because
can you explain block in for those who maybe don't understand what that means?
Oh, just like simplifying the shapes, like like seeing the
posterizing, notan kind of.
Kind of, yeah. Notan, dark, simple, dark light. You're just keeping it as simple and light as possible, just to kind of find your way in. There's no detail. You're taking the biggest shapes first and breaking it then into the smaller shapes. So I would always I think just what you said, it's kind of a combination of line and value work, and then you just work your way down to more detail. And all these years of working from life, I'm there struggling. You're holding your thumb up. You're measuring the model. You're trying to get it right. I think working kind of in a let's see. I don't know what the right term for that is. I don't want to say linear because that's what we're talking about, line, but just a literal fashion, and trying to render and copy the model. And then again, that was one of those times when I'm bored. I mean, I was doing these live sessions with a friend here in my studio for a couple of years where he's a sculptor and I was painting, and we were getting models sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. And finally, after a while, I stopped. I was like, I didn't tell him I was bored. I couldn't explain it to him. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was bored. I couldn't bring myself to draw another drawing of the figure. And we were getting male figures in all kinds of different shapes and stuff. So there was variety there, but that was one of my early times. I was like, what is going on with me? Why can't how come I can't access these drawings anymore? I can't figure it out. And I think Martin Campos had something to do with that. And I'm watching what he's doing. And another artist that I have to give credit to is Nicholas Uribe.
Oh, yeah, he's great too.
Oh, God, he really talks a lot about exaggerating your forms and exaggerating your shapes. And he's like, you show up kind of like in your work when you begin to exaggerate and you begin to change. And that started ticking something off in my brain. It started tickling something like, oh, that sounds exciting. And so this is where fear comes in. It's like, I got a lot of these that didn't work out, but I just started drawing more intuitively. And I know that sounds like, oh, yeah, duh. Yeah, whatever. But no more like planning, no measuring, no. And I'll say this, like shutting that left brain down and just going full on, put on some Led Zeppelin and get in the, it's like you got to feel it. I don't know. You know it when you're in the zone, and I just start working with line, and the line is, I'm doing absolutely no measuring in my head. I don't care. I'm just playing with the line, and they just started. It just started a whole new thing for me. It's like, oh my god, I kind of reinvigorated drawing figure again, and that's kind of how these come out of it. So they just develop from there, but it can be a difficult. I haven't been able to get back in that mode for a couple months, or longer actually. And I sit down and draw them, and it's just not there. So it's kind of a. I wish I could just do it. I wish I could just sit down, like, okay, I'm going to draw a figure today. I'm going to do this, but it's being very elusive, and I don't know why it's being very elusive. And so I don't. Yeah, I have. This was maybe the last few I did were earlier this year, and a lot last year, but.
So you're saying you kind of had a good run, and now you're kind of stumped?
Yeah.
You're kind of in a low point?
Yep. Exactly.
Isn't that funny how that happens?
That's funny. It's frustrating as hell. It's maddening. It's maddening. It's just like, I mean, I probably spent an entire month coming up to the studio and say, okay, you know, I'm on, you know, you want to end things on a good note. You want to say like, oh man, that drawing was perfect. Now I'm going to stop and I'm going to go do something else. You don't want to end on failure, 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 you know, so, but the more you fail, the more you're like, oh, I'm going to do it this time. And sometimes I think the harder I try, the worse it gets. And so I decided, like, I got to back up, do something else. And when it comes back, it will come back. But I wish it wasn't so elusive. I wish I could control it more, because I enjoy, and they sell really well. I've got collectors that like them. I keep the price point low. I love selling to everyday people who can afford the art. I love it. I love that clientele, and they love this work, and I get such great feedback from it. And I feel bad that I'm not able to say, you know, I kind of giving them to clients, and you know, some of them keep waiting. It's like, you know, when are you going to do more of these? Well, soon. But I don't know. I don't know how long this dry spell is going to take. It's so strange. It's so strange.
Yeah, you know, statistic. I can't remember the book I read, but it was about, this was years ago. So, I mean, now I'm sure it may be worse, but it just talked about the suicide rates, how the suicide rates of teenagers are increasing so much because of social media. And, and as I'm listening to you, which is terrible, because particularly with young women, how they go to Instagram and they see that every other young woman always looks beautiful, and every other young woman's life is perfect, and every other, you know, and at least that's what the book said. I'm no expert. That's what it said. But I feel like, I wonder if there's a statistic with artists, if there could be some sort of a poll done on what this is doing to the artist's brain, what Instagram is doing to all of our psyches and all of our self-esteems. Because when I look at your Instagram, it just looks like you never go through this. You just keep on posting, and Bryce just never has a bad day. You know?
That's so funny, Jeff. You know, yeah, don't you? And you see, like, you know, conventions and things, like, you know, you've been to so many of the plein air, the Portrait Society, and that just happened. And I see all the artists hanging out together, and they're having such a great time. There's so much great artwork there, and I'm like, oh man, I'm just left out again. You know,
why don't you come to it? How come you don't come to it?
I don't know. Since COVID, it's gotten harder for me. I'm still kind of a little bit of a introvert, like a hermit. I've kind of hermitized myself a little bit more, but I've never submitted to it because I've never felt like my portraiture is that strong. So I thought, well, you know, maybe if I can bring my portraiture up, something that's a little more portrait oriented, you know, maybe I'll try to submit to it or something.
Well,
like
listen to the last interview I did that was sort of a summary of last year or this past convention, and we talk about that in the interview. And they talk about how it's gone so figurative. It's not really about portraits as much as it used to be.
You know, I noticed that a few years back when Jeremy Lipking, I believe, won it. Joseph Todorovich.
Oh, it's gotten way more figurative than that.
And I thought, wow. I mean, that really made that big change right there from that kind of traditional portrait look, and then they're bringing these figurative pieces into it. So I do realize that, you know, the figure is okay in that too. So I guess I was spending more of my time with Oil Painters of America there for a while, and I felt like that was kind of my convention. And um, I'm not even really going to those conventions right now. So,
Right. So how do
but
you
yeah,
have you had these slumps often? And if so, how have you figured out any techniques to get through them, or do you just wait it out?
well, it's like with this, I think with this slump, this was specific slump. This was specifically toward drawing. And I've noticed somebody said something about color the other day. Oh, probably Martin. You know, all the wise chunks of information that come from Martin's mouth. Something about he uses color to access. I think it was on your interview actually. It's something
Hmm.
about using color to access his emotions or something like that. And I thought, I think it's just my brain saying, I need you to get back to color. I
Hmm.
need I need to bring color on. So I've noticed as I'm painting, my anything I'm painting, I'm doing fine. I'm perfectly fine. So when I sit down to draw, I kind of run into this. So this is a very specific dry spell, but I have had. I mean, I kind of suffer with it's like a manic depressive, and not clinical. That I know there's people that really have that severely, but I think there's a lot of newer research about that more people have small degrees of that than they've ever really thought about. But parts of my life where you just I don't know, and I think a lot of artists probably kind
Yeah,
of
I was going to say that. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I feel like 9 out of 10 of my students uh, struggle with some kind of mental. I don't want to say mental illness, but some kind of
yeah, no, I
anxiety,
agree.
depression,
Anxiety.
something. Yeah,
Well,
and
I,
and
I
I
think
deal with anxiety myself, so
I,
it's
I think that's why we're artists partially because our brains work different. I joke a little bit because I do have dyslexia for sure, not severely, but it's like I have ADD and OCD. Like how do you make those two opposite worlds? How does that work in one person? How can you have both of those traits? And then on top of that, you kind of have the anxiety, and then I kind of have that manic depressive a little bit. So there's time with that. There's just periods of time when you're so productive and you're in the zone. And that's a couple times with doing those drawings, it was just day after day and just doing that. And then I have learned to control it now. I kind of know things that trigger certain trigger points and stuff. So I've learned to control it. But more in the past, you get up on that high, and then just something will trigger it. Something will trigger that, and I think sometimes it can be too high. You go too high too long, and you cannot maintain that energy, and that brings you down. But there have been times when, in the past, like some troll will make a comment on a piece of artwork, and you'll read that comment, and at first you're like, care what they say, but it gets in the back of your mind, and it starts tearing away at you, and then before you know it, 3 or 4 days, down you go. You're going down. It didn't cause it, but it just triggered it. And then you just spend this time in that more depressive mode, that mode where you're not enthusiastic. You don't really feel like making art. And usually at those times, I can do something mechanical. I'm always like the mechanical part of me is always okay. It's like, well, let's go in the shop and do some woodwork or something. But creating the artwork has to kind of wait until that manic state starts to, or you level off a little bit. But so yeah, that has happened through my whole life. That's part of me. I have learned to. There's certain things I've learned lately to control that, and something really just zen, kind of a zen thinking behind that, without getting into that whole hoo-ha and stuff. But I've learned to think a little bit different, and that's really, really helped a lot. So yeah, so the drawing one was specific, and I think I just need to listen to my body, listen to my creative voice saying, get your butt over there and do some color. Let's get you painting again, and then we'll come back to the drawings when you're good and ready. So
hmm, hmm. You know that in the name of complete transparency, we're professional artists bear all, right?
well,
I
that's what I
actually,
thought.
yeah,
No, I'm gonna
just
just
bear
gonna
all.
go for it.
Well, I'm going to go even further here. So I've dealt with PTSD due to health issues, like big time. And I mean, nothing, I'm
Yeah,
not comparing myself to a soldier or anything, but I was diagnosed
right.
with it, right? I was literally diagnosed with it. But at the time, my psychologist at the time said that whenever he's ever had an artist, they've always been the same in how they're different from all of his other patients.
Really?
And I was like, can you define that? And he's like, he wouldn't define it. And because I'm like, I hated being put into that little package. He's like, yep, you're like all the other artists I've dealt with. I'm like, oh, come on. You can't be for real. I mean, this is obviously anecdotal. It's one psychologist, or psychiatrist, but I found it kind of disconcerting on one hand, but also very interesting. Disconcerting because it's like, I don't like to be put into a little package, right? And it's like, oh, I'm an artist, therefore I think like this, right? But at the same time, it was very interesting because we've all the artists I ever talked to all say it. Yeah, we're all so sensitive, you know. But
Very sensitive.
But according to the shrink, apparently it's true. I don't know. I'm not seeing this guy anymore, though.
I mean, you know, it's funny because we do something that requires thick skin. You know, isn't that a dichotomy?
I don't know. I don't know.
And you know, I know there's artists out there that I think they put on a big show and they say, "Oh, that doesn't bother me," and maybe they control it better. But I think somewhere down there, they're like, "No, it probably does bother them." I don't think you can get away from that thin skin that we have.
I think it goes beyond that. And what do you? I'm curious. This is way off topic here, but this is fun conversation. I think it goes beyond that because. So yesterday, I was driving with my wife. I had this long, great day with my wife. We went out. We're doing this scavenger hunt all over Utah, and it was fun. But she wanted to pull up navigation on her phone, and I've got this iPad that's mounted to my dashboard that I made. That I just freaking love it. I'm like, no, let's pull it up on the dash because that's what it's for, right? Like I made it for that. I want to use my navigation, you know. And she's like, oh gosh, you have to do everything just right. And then later, there was something else wrong, and I couldn't leave the van until something was put away just right, and this, that, and the other. And to me, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I also think it's artists or maybe a certain type of artists at least, particularly maybe realists, are so consumed with surrounding themselves with perfection and beauty. It's not just about what we're making. It's that like everything around us, if something is wrong, something's not right, something doesn't look right, something isn't functioning properly, it's torturous. Have you experienced that yourself?
Every day.
It's not just my art. It's like the van has to be perfect. The house has to be perfect. The bedroom has to be perfect. The studio has to be perfect. Everything has to be perfect or I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable.
It's funny to hear you say that because I feel like you have produced such an incredible, huge body of work, and these gigantic...
my body of work is tiny. Oh, that's crazy.
I mean, I've seen your. I got to come up to your open house here and see your new painting, but I've seen your big paintings down in Springville. I mean, they're like 12 feet tall and they're gorgeous, and I'm thinking, how does he do all this? I'm like, I'm thinking, man. And this is my head. I'm thinking, okay, so Jeff is just like, zoomed in. He's just doing art. And I know you teach, and I know how much teaching takes out and stuff. And it's like, I don't know how you do it with all the teaching, but and then to hear you say this, it kind of blows my mind away because I'm exactly like that because I've got this old house and
which is beautiful, by the way, which doesn't surprise me. I'm looking at your studio and it's gorgeous.
Thanks.
It's really cool.
Bought this old 1927 house that just requires this is new construction. I just tried to make it look like the old house, but the old house just needs constant care. And I bought a little bit bigger piece of property that takes a lot of like weeding but it's exactly what you say. And I was going to say this is like, I feel like my body of work could have been so much bigger. It's like, I've got to get my discipline down and get my, like work done every day and then fix those things. And then,
it's not possible. I can't do it.
But I'm so good to hear you. I'm so glad to hear you say that because if I don't fix them, if I don't get up in the morning, it's like, I gotta do that. I gotta do that. My brain will it won't allow me to do anything else. And it's like, I have to fix all those little things, it's whatever it is. And then like, oh, great. Now I got 2 hours left, to do artwork. I should have great. Now I'll do a little bit of artwork or something, but it's so consuming. It's so consuming to need to fix and straighten and clean and repair and make
Oh my
better.
gosh, why aren't we
Oh,
hanging out, dude? I don't know if we'd be
I
bad for each other or
know.
good for each other because you sound like exactly like me. Did you build that cabinet behind you?
The bookcase or the short one?
Flat file looking thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
built that. I to build it from scratch.
It's really cool. But I'm just imagining coming up. It looks like you got stairs going down behind you or
There's
something.
stairs on the
Okay.
other side. Yep.
It's really cool. I'm imagining coming up down one morning, coming around there and like dinging the corner of it. And so maybe a certain type of person would just get to work. I'd take the next 3 days fixing that because I can't function knowing that it's
But
broken. Like I
yep.
can't function. And it is kind of amazing that I get anything done, frankly, but I just have to work a lot. I mean, I'm busy
Oh,
all the time.
yeah.
Um,
You just seem to have so much get up and go. You got so much energy, and I and
no, no,
how
no,
long?
it's not energy. It's the anxiety. It's amazing. It's like an old car. I'm an old car and the anxiety is like jet fuel. So I don't have the energy. The anxiety just drives me through the
Oh,
tiredness.
wow. Okay.
I mean, I've got a decent amount of energy. I exercise and stuff, and that helps. But it's not like I just bounce up in the morning and like, ooh, I can't wait to work another 14-hour day. It's more like
like
I
like
just
when you were
got to
25.
get stuff done. Like I gotta get stuff
Yeah.
done. It has to be done, right?
Hmm.
So
Yep. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's funny you can't see it here, but I have this old easel I bought back in 2000. Old. It was a nice easel, but it came from China. It was kind of a crank. It's a crank easel, and it was made in a humid climate. It came to a dry climate. It's 20 years old. It was made in China. It wasn't made all that good, but I liked what it did. And I just finally was like, I've had enough of this easel. So it's down in my garage, torn to the bones, and I'm rebuilding it all back to make it exactly what I want. I've been spending an inordinate amount of time remaking this easel, and I'm thinking, what idiot
oh my
does that? What
gosh. Yep.
idiot spends that amount of time? I had several friends come by and they said, why don't you just buy a new one? I was like, well, it's kind of expensive, and I actually like this one. It's
Yeah.
there's a lot of things I like about it. So there's my left brain, or my construction part of my brain that just says, oh, let's dig into that. So I've been spending all my energy, and I'm like right now, like when we're done with this, like okay, I'm gonna go down there and I want to get it done and get it back up here so I can use it. But yeah, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect.
Oh
So
man. Yeah. Well, you said what
maddening.
idiot. You said what idiot. This idiot. This idiot would do that. So
Oh, okay. I think we do need to. I think we do
this
need to.
idiot would do the same
That's
thing.
funny.
Yeah.
No, I had no idea you were like that.
Yep, absolutely. Well, let's go back to your art. I want to look at a little bit more of your art here.
Okay.
All right. So I want, I feel like you made a change and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you alluded to it earlier and I'm wondering if I can see it on your Instagram reel, but I feel like maybe a few years back, your work shifted a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, am I wrong about that?
No, no, you're spot on.
Now I'm trying
Spot
to
on.
find your older stuff. Because I mean, you've been on
There's a transition. Yeah, transitioning right there.
right through here. You feel like?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of slow, but it's there. Yeah, I see both there. I see. Yeah, there's some life drawings there. There's that green one. Actually, all
Yep,
three right
yep,
across there.
yep.
Drawing.
This is different.
Starting to allow exaggerations and allowing emotion to come in and just cranking up the music and just going for it and stop worrying about proportions. Just stop. That's what it is. I had a note here in my studio to remind myself, and it just said, "Let go." Just let go.
Huh.
Being that kind of personality that we've been kind of talking about. You want to control everything, and so it's like let go and just allow. And you mentioned that's another problem that all of like artists have. We have that perfectionism. That perfectionism gene that you're just like, oh my God, everything has to be perfect. And it's just like, telling that perfectionism to, you're not helping me, let me see where this takes me. Perfectionism is going to ruin it in its own way.
Yeah.
So, why not have a little fun and try this and see what this does? And so
But isn't there
but yes,
perfectionism in the imperfection too, though? Like, it can't, do
yes,
you know what I mean? Like,
it's
that's
like,
the perfect accident. Like, I
hmm
love it. I didn't control it. It's technically imperfect, but it's perfect.
hmm
I guess
right,
it's
right,
semantics.
right.
Well, this painting though, this is one that I'm talking about. This to me, I don't feel like you paint like this anymore. This is
hmm
more,
No,
what's the word? It has sort of a nostalgic quality, almost like
romantic,
a romantic
called it romantic.
quality. Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that I was selling in galleries. And I know I don't want to poo-poo it or anything,
No,
but
it's
it's like I
great.
got to this where I didn't want to paint romantic uh, um, imagery anymore. But when I was in the galleries, and so starting off selling in the galleries, and being self-taught and having a family, it was kind of this whole mentality. Well, it still is, fake it till you make it. And so, I'm throwing pieces out in galleries, and you're responding to the ones that sell. And so, obviously, the ones that sell, galleries were all very nice. They never told me what to paint, but you knew what. It's like,
Yeah.
go ahead and paint something it's not going to sell. What's the point? The point was to at that point, I was trying to get better, but the point was to make a living. And at that point, we were relying on my income. And so, and that feeling, it's like
Hmm.
you've got to bring the money in, so you've got to paint what will sell. And you get something a romantic feel, you throw a little backlighting on it, and that puppy will sell. And so that's the change where I pulled out of my galleries, and it wasn't that they were selling and I pulled out, but the art market changed. Art market just has changed, and they stopped selling, and I was no longer making a living from the gallery sales.
Really?
And then point, yeah,
Wait, so
this
when was this? When did the art market change for you?
I was thinking it was on 2014, 2015. I noticed a big change. I kind of felt like it went more contemporary. I felt like the figurative world that was maybe a little more impressionistic, romantic, that I had been doing just kind of stopped. And it wasn't just me. It just seemed like a lot of my friends that were doing
In different
similar work,
galleries.
different galleries. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Across the board, just kind of, and I think if you were doing something more contemporary at that point, you may not have noticed it. But I think in this genre, it just kind of came to a halt, and it was really strange. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what brought it on. Some people say the internet brought it on. Some people say new generation of collectors have come along. They don't want to collect what their parents collected. I don't know what the truth is, but yeah, sales begin to drop.
Hmm.
Taking on a few more commissions and stuff like that to try to make up for it. But gallery, and then of course, a few years later, 2020 hits, and then a lot of those galleries went out of business. And then that was just after that. I think I decided to pull all my work out of galleries, and I thought, let's try to figure out what I want to paint. So I don't have that need to paint that subject matter over my head anymore. And so yeah, this would be my gallery stage, I guess.
So
Commercial gallery.
you've been living without galleries since 2020?
Yeah, it might have been 2021. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, my income shifted a little bit from, when the gallery stopped selling at this time, my wife had to get a job, and
Hmm.
then in those years, her job has gotten better, and my income's gone down, and her income's gone up a little bit. So
Hmm.
we're able to stay afloat. We don't, we're not living in the lap of luxury or anything, but have a nice house, and
Hmm.
we live meagerly. We try to keep our expenses down and stuff like that. So it's been a nice time to say, wow, I'd like to go in and just find out what art means to me. Why do I create? What do I want to create? How do I want to see? And again, so like this romantic feel, I don't have any interest in doing that anymore.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it at all. Lots of collectors have those paintings and enjoy them, and I'm very, very grateful for them to, to collect that art.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So do you feel like that some positive came out of them not selling those paintings anymore so you were able to reinvent yourself?
I guess so. You know, I probably didn't think about it at the time. It was very stressful. It's like, I don't know how to make ends meet anymore. And trying to teach a few workshops and, you know, trying to just make ends meet. It was very stressful, but, you know, looking back at it, it's like, yeah, it's worked out pretty good. It's, I'm glad. I mean, my wife's probably like, yeah, you know,
Yeah, not for me.
you were in a few galleries, made a little more money.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like the new work, as I advance it, and I've got to just, you know, I've got to get it going faster. But the multifigural, we'll see kind of where it goes. I can see it being just a much different feel. So even if I were to go back in galleries, which I guess I'm kind of planning on that, the work is going to be so different. It's going to be completely different galleries that would hopefully pick me up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can still tell it's you, but it's almost like you got younger, if you don't mind me saying. It's like you aged backwards. Benjamin Button. Yeah.
Benjamin Button. Yeah, that's me. I guess that'll be my new code name.
Yeah, you're aging backwards. Yeah, your stuff's much more. I mean, I don't take this the wrong way because I've always been a fan.
No.
I've always been a fan, but it's much
I
more.
Appreciate that. No,
it's more hip, more edgy.
Now. Yeah. I thank you. That's enough to give me encouragement to keep going. I love edgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people talk about it. You know, I've noticed just in the past 4 or 5 years, my students bringing you up more. And
really?
Yeah, a lot more. That's been kind of cool to watch that. I mean, I
think.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I'm terrible. I was going to, you know, like I'm a pretty typical artist. I'm horrible at self-promotion. You know, I just completely shy away from it. But I would say I noticed something happened I won the Oil Painters of America.
Congrats.
The big prize in 2020, which was such a crap year because we had to do it via.
Oh, you got robbed.
Got the conference down, so I got robbed. And you know, we had to do it via Zoom. But I think when I won that award, it actually did give me some notoriety. I noticed that things changed a little bit in that regard. And I don't know if that's what it was or not, but you know, I mean, I've been
maybe, but I noticed it before that. 2020 wasn't that long ago. I noticed it before.
No,
that.
It really wasn't.
Starting to happen before that. Yeah. But okay, I remember I messaged you once and said I wanted one of these.
Yes.
I freaking love these. And this is that open acrylic stuff again, right?
It is. Yeah. Yep.
I love these.
You met, this is my friend, so that's his wife, and I think this next one is Nate. You met him. He came to your open studio last time, and
you did.
He telling me how cool it was and stuff. Yeah, so he gets together with his family, and they all send pictures of them. They pick a look, you know, they pick some, and then the other 3 have to duplicate the look. So he showed me those things, and I thought, oh, those would be so fun to paint. So they're kind of wonky. They're a little weird, and you know, and that's that. Like, I'm no longer trying to make them. Actually, they do look like them, but I wasn't trying to make them look like them. I was just having fun and trying to be different, and just, you know, that letting yourself. That's that term. Let go. Just let go and see where it goes. And
yeah,
that would. I got a whole bunch more of those in a sketchbook. I was doing it at the same time. But I posted those 4 because I you know, I know the people in them. It was such a fun story of what they did.
I want to see that. I'd love to see that sketchbook because I don't know. I'm drawn to portraits. I love portraits, obviously, because I paint portraits.
You do so many. Your portraits are amazing. Like I said, I was using you as the example of like, oh God, I got to figure out how to draw portraits. Like pull up.
Oh, that's nice of you. But what I love about this is the linear quality, the way that you put these cool outlines around the forms.
It's so fun to play with those. That's a concept, like you said. You know, you're taught it doesn't exist in nature, and so you're pulling up these elements that are not real, and they're so fun to play with. It's like, oh, why wasn't I playing with that 20 years ago? This is so fun.
Mm-hmm. So how do you choose? I've asked this question of artists who do multiple mediums. I think I asked it of Daniel Keyes because he does the pastel and then he does oil paint.
Yeah.
So I'll ask of you too. How do you choose which medium is appropriate for which subject?
Well, that's a good question. You know, I think these were not long after I got the open acrylic, so I was playing with it, and it was a new medium to me, so I wanted to get a little bit of mileage. They're in a sketchbook, so I wanted to be able to close the sketchbook down within a
Oh,
certain amount of
okay.
time. It's on paper. Now, it's like, traditionally, you don't put oil on paper. And I know lately that's, like with Nicholas Uribe, he paints oil on paper and doesn't care. But, so I was like, well, I didn't necessarily want to put oil on the paper. So I thought, well, the acrylics are perfect. So, I mean, that's kind of why they're in the open acrylic. In that
Okay.
same sketchbook, I think I've got a few where I sealed the paper and a few are in oil. But yeah, so and that might add to that the line quality in there too, because it is trying to dry on you and it's trying to grab, and it's not something you can work with like you can in oil. So you do start pulling out different aspects of it that are conducive to working in a different medium. So I think the two just seem to work together.
It really does kind of look like gouache, and it's making me want
It
to go out
does
and
does
paint gouache. Yeah.
gouache. I
Just,
swear, I on a weekly basis, I'm like, I have got to paint in gouache. I love the way gouache looks.
yeah, what
it
is it
just has
about
like a
it?
velvety,
Yeah.
velvety feel. I mean, Scott Christensen was posting all those little gouache that he was doing. And it's like, I love those. Oh, they're beautiful.
You should try it. And let me know what you think of it and what you discover, because it is hard.
Okay.
For me, it's hard because of the way the colors
Oh,
change, but the
it does
values
change. Yeah.
change. But you seem to have already kind of dealt with that problem and
Well,
successfully.
yeah. Yeah, I think the golden opal acrylics, they do darken, but because they stay wet longer, I think that's a little closer a kinship to oil, where gouache, and the cool thing, as we know, with gouache is it's rewettable. So I guess in a strange way, it has that same capacity to move around a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It is. All right, let's see. I'm going to look at just a few more of your drawings. One of the things I also love about your drawings, okay, well, I said drawings, but oh man, these are so beautiful. What the? You also have a gift for flesh tones, is one thing I've noticed about your work.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
You just have such beautiful, subtle color and temperature variation in your flesh tones.
Hmm,
Maybe you could tell me a
thanks.
little bit about, I mean, what is your approach to flesh tones? I mean, do you have anything unique that you could offer us that helps you to get these beautiful tones?
Hmm. Ooh, limited palette. I think that would be,
Really, it is
that.
limited.
Yeah, I went that, so that would have added maybe an extra one on those highlights. But I've been using palette just like one step further past the Zorn palette. So it's like white, of course, cad yellow, like a cad yellow, and then it's a burnt sienna, an alizarin crimson, and blue. Uh,
Ultramarine.
ultra, thank you,
Oh my
ultramarine
gosh, I'm
blue.
the same way. When people ask me my colors, I'm like, please don't ask me to name the colors. I'm like the pretty green, the pretty red, the kind of bluish red, like oh man.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
I
limited.
think that's helpful, I think, to me. But I was trying to think, obviously when I'm back, I mentioned way back earlier about watching the John Howard Sandon video paint the Sargent painting. He did a master copy. And John Howard, I love John Howard Sandon's work. It's beautiful, but, he's very controlled with his piles, his mixtures, and his tones. And, he was selling his own paint, and you buy them. This was back, before 2000. This is like the 1990s, 1995. I don't remember, but you've got, and I have to air quote this, flesh tone, and let's say Caucasian flesh tone,
Oh, that makes any
high
figurative
value,
painter
middle
kind of
value,
sick.
dark value.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so controlled. And so I started off with that. I was kind of using that, and I was like, oh, and then I'm trying to remember. I don't, I think just looking at artists like Dan Gerhardt's and um, I can't think of any more, but just like seeing what he was doing in his flesh, and I wanted to do that so bad.
Hmm.
And I don't remember, anything other than just wanting to like get change ups in my flesh tone. And there's
So
not really any more than that to it, I don't think.
so what about this? So along her back here on the opposite side of her spine, it's cooler than it is on the front side of her back, the side closest to us.
Hmm.
So I'm assuming that was something that you did in order to create depth, not an observation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not just copying flesh here. You're inventing on some
Oh,
level.
yeah. 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 My mom would always paint from black and white photographs, and she always told me, she said, make, I was, teenager, and she's teaching. I didn't understand it, but she's teaching me this, like, learn your values and then make up your color. You can put any color you want in there as long as you got your value right. It's like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So quite often I will pull up a photo and I'll turn it to black and white, and I'm just trying to paint when I remember a little bit, like, oh, let's try a violet there. It's a receding color. Let's try some green there. And so I might go back and forth between black and white and color and just remind myself, like, oh, that's right. That's, maybe it needs to be like that. But yeah, there's a lot of it that's just intuitive. I'm just having fun with it. Just having fun with color. Just trying to focus on the temperature. The temperature and value is kind of like the focus, I guess.
The audience will have to forgive me because I may have said this before and maybe even multiple times in the podcast, but I worked from life, only from life for 14 years until COVID hit. And it was one of the things that always frustrated the crud out of me. It was when an artist would say, "Oh, I wish I worked from life because it's so much easier because you can see everything, all the colors, blah, blah, blah." And I would always think to myself, are you seriously copying the colors? Like what are you talking about? Like, I don't care if I'm working from life, working from a photo, working from imagination. I'm
Yep.
not copying the colors.
Yep.
I'm making this stuff up. Like
You're making it up.
I
Yeah.
mean, you're inspired by the colors,
Right.
right?
Right. You're inspired by the light. You're working under a cool light or a warm light. You're like, oh, that's great. Let's capture the feeling of the warmth or the cool or whatever, start you off.
Right.
But yeah, you're just like, it's just intuitive, it is, like you said, it's hard to somebody to ask you, ooh, what's in that mixture? Like,
Yeah,
don't know.
every workshop I teach, I'm like, don't ask me what I mixed. To me, that question is like asking a concert pianist right in the middle of the concert. Whoa, 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 whoa. What key did you just hit? What key did you just hit? And they'd be
That's
like,
perfect.
which, when, which
Well,
time?
what are you talking about? I mean, yeah,
What key? I mean, it's like, how could I possibly tell you what color I just mixed? I'm just working
yeah.
here.
It's just it's mileage, It's mileage. The
Yeah.
more you work, the more you free yourself up to push things. But you stick with the principles of, like, you get that value, right or close. Don't forget about your temperatures, and just, make up whatever color you want.
Mm-hmm.
Some colors recede, some colors come forward. There's some rules back in there, but man, you're free to kind of play the keys however you want.
Yeah. Are you familiar with David LaFell?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So when I was at the University of Utah, I started studying his book. Now this is 20 plus years ago. So now forgive me, I can't remember the name, something Masters, Oil Painting Masters or something.
Oh, I've got that
You
book.
got that book? Yeah. And I
I have
remember,
that book.
oh, and by the way, you had listed all the people you wouldn't bring up at the University of Utah. Well, David LaFell, add that to the list. Don't bring that up. Don't bring him up at the University of Utah. Um,
I can imagine.
they didn't like him. He was too good at painting. Um,
Oh,
but
that's
anyway,
funny.
I was studying him as well as a bunch of other people while I was going to school, trying to figure out how to paint on the side while I was going to school. And one of the things that he said in that book that just was a game changer, totally, really, really helped me a lot to learn how to paint, is he's basically what you said. You could paint a face or a figure any color you want. And he actually had some samples of
I've,
self-portraits of him like with a green face, like
I've
almost
heard
green.
them.
Do you remember that?
Yep, yep.
And
I
I
was
was
just gonna
like, it
say,
looks
all
so
these weird colors.
real. Yeah,
Yep,
it looks so
yep.
real. It was really eye-opening
Hmm.
how effective value is and how almost irrelevant color is. Although he does talk about that the temperature of the color matters, but not so much the
Temperature. Yeah.
hue, right?
Not so much the hue. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're a master at it because your colors,
Oh.
Your colors are just beautiful. Because, I mean, what also matters and what I think you have in spades is harmony, color harmony. It's not like you can just throw any old color as long as it's the right value. You're getting these
Yep.
beautiful color harmonies.
Wow, thanks. Thank you. I don't know how. I don't know. I guess there's no plan behind that.
Oh, come on, there has
I
to be.
appreciate that. That makes me feel good. That makes me feel really good.
You must be thinking about it. I mean, when you're mixing these flesh tones on this sort of aqua, I don't know, what do you call this color? I don't know, this kind of like
Mm-hmm.
aqua
Kind
blue
of
sort of color.
Yeah.
Yeah. You must be thinking about trying to harmonize the skin to the environment because you're doing it.
I think probably the thought process, just what's going through your head when you're doing it, is like, well, what's the light doing, and then what's bouncing into the flesh. So, like, if that was a green sheet under her, it's going to be bouncing greens all over in there. So, probably I would say that's probably all that's going on in my head. So you're mixing a lot of that. It's funny. Back in the olden days, I laugh at myself because I remember painting paintings where I would mix up piles of paint. This was after the Sandin period, and I would paint the background, right, with all these colors of paint. But then over here on the palette, I would mix up all the colors for the flesh. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's really funny. Not there's anything wrong with that. I mean, we all go through
I did
it,
the
right?
same thing. Yeah.
But then you learn, like, oh, everything's related to everything. Colors are bouncing around and into the flesh, and the flesh is bouncing onto other things. And so then all of a sudden my colors or my piles are all the same. I'm dipping in by mixing up that green. I might also pull into that green and stick it right in the flesh because so I think it's not really thinking too much about it, but it's just that thought process of it's all about the light, man. What's the
Okay.
light doing? The light, and skin's a mirror. Skin is a mirror. It mirrors everything around it. So just,
Okay.
yeah.
So when I took a break a little while ago and we weren't recording, we started talking about all the things we like to do and about the scientific mind. And I said to you, art is a science. And you seemed sort of intrigued by that statement. But
Yeah.
I want to say that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because
Yeah.
you just said, no, I'm not thinking about harmony. I'm thinking about these. You didn't say science, but basically the science of light.
Yeah.
Right. And
Well,
that's kind of
when
what I was that's suggesting is it's really,
yeah.
it's problem solving.
Yeah.
And then you come back in and you kind of sweep everything up and you're like, okay, I've problem solved now. So now does it look good? And maybe that's where the art comes in, where you start to kind of
Yeah.
shift. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I was just going to go back. I taught at Salt Lake Community College a few years back for a while, and you may have picked up that term. They probably use that there. I'd never heard it before, but they said trying to help me with my curriculum, light logic, teach your students light logic. And I thought, it's just semantics. It's just another way of kind of saying that. But I thought that's kind of a scientific way and given that approach of that light logic, and you look at James Gurney's book. So with that one, the light, I can't remember what that was. He's got a couple of, but he really covers a lot of that. And it's just like understand the science of light and what it does. And if you understand that, you can paint from your imagination. You can paint it any way you want. And we know James paints all kinds of things from his imagination. So that's science coming back into there. It's like learn the light logic. Figure it out. Figure out what light does, and then you're free to kind of do it the way you want after that.
Yeah. But I would take it even one step further. And when I say it's like science, I don't mean literally there are scientific principles. Well, there are, you just stated one, light logic. But what I mean is it's like science in that it's problem solving.
Problem solving, yeah.
It's not just like barfing emotions all over the canvas. It's problem
Right, yeah.
solving. And then maybe when then you get into the abstract side of it, that's the art side. And then you have the craftsmanship side, which feels more like problem solving, and then marry those two.
That's a good try.
And you
That's a
have
good
art.
try to put
Yeah.
together to make art. Yeah. No, yeah, you're right about science, because the scientists get in the lab and they throw something together and see how it works. And then they base their next experiment off how that works, how that experiment was, and they keep going down this path. So that's that problem solving path, isn't it?
Right, right. At least that's how it feels to
Huh.
me.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I would be interested in what people think. So so the listeners, whoever's listening right now, if you'd like to comment on that, I'd be interested in what you guys think about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so let me just look at a couple more and then we'll wrap up. Oh, here's another one where
This has been so I did post that. So there's one of my early forays into the multifigural thing.
okay. Yeah, I see what you mean by shape. It's very abstract. But
Yeah.
you've also intentionally exploited that because you're leaving out features. You're just really simplifying it down to basic shapes and forms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've gone more that way since this one. This was an earlier one.
Do you have
And
other
so I
ones that you
really
want that I could
those.
pull up?
I don't think I've posted. I was just shot some the other day and thought, well, I'll put some of these up. But I don't think I've posted very many. I'll throw them up in my stories once in a while.
And then the last thing I want to bring up is that you really have a way of posing your figures. I mean, everything from this, which is so unusual and yet so interesting,
And
to
that's actually the model. So that one I don't usually work from, and then the one after that too is, so that one right there. Yeah. So that's Tiffany Cole. She's a model.
that's not
And
the
that's
same
her
girl
pose.
twice.
No, then the other one is
Oh,
another model. So they're both, in this case, they're their images that I interpreted. But I thought on both cases they were more successful than I get a lot of time. But I have a harder time interpreting someone else's image. I may like the image, I get this all the time. Like I have friendships. A lot of these models are the same models that Martin draws all the time. We have this little family thing going on the internet, and I'll see this image and I think, oh my, that's a gorgeous image, and then they may send me the image, and then I'll sit down and try to like turn it into art. Just get this huge disconnect. It's like, wow, I don't know how to, I don't want to render it. I don't know how to turn it into art. So there is, you've talked a lot about this on your podcast, obviously working from life, you get this, you meet the person, you sense the person, you get to know them and you get this connection. And I would even have to say, you're taking pictures of that person. It's
that's
a
something
kinship
too.
to listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when you're getting an image of someone you've never met and they posed it, I still think they're cool. And then somehow you have to translate that into your art. Man, I'm finding that hard. But this one is Tiffany. And that was one of my best days. When I exaggerated that, when I pushed that one, I had so much fun with that image.
Hmm.
I was cooking that day.
That's
And then
great.
the other one is another model that lives in Texas, and I've gotten to be friends with her. And I asked her if she could send me some images that she doesn't share with anybody else, and she sent that. And I thought that was like the next day. I was cooking on that day. I pumped that one out, and it worked really good. But it's a rarity that I can do that from somebody else's image.
Hmm. Okay, so what about this one? Is this someone else's? Is this yours?
No, that's mine. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but
mine.
it's
The image
gorgeous.
I took in my studio. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I
Oh,
feel, I mean, part of it's just control. I can control my light. I'm used to my light. I'm used to my atmosphere. And again, though, but I've met the model. We've hung out. We've spent time in the same room together a little bit. So, there's some kind of weird connection, and it just makes the drawing the images, interpreting the images more feasible.
I'd love, I'm thinking about this because I just did a critique for my online students last week, and a couple of them are working on. They do a Zoom session because they're obviously from all over the world, right? So they do a Zoom session that I film here at the studio, and it's live, and they draw from the live model, right, over Zoom,
Yeah.
which is kind of
Live
like,
model.
yeah, I think of what you were saying you were doing with Martin Campos, right?
Mhm.
Right. So it was actually inspired by that. When I interviewed him, I was like, I want to try this for my students. They love it.
He
But
he does. He's a master at that Zoom. I mean, he does it every Sunday. He sets up those sessions and they draw from the model, and it's amazing what he does.
yeah. But anyway, they turned some of their stuff in and it was quite good, but a couple of them had a problem overdoing the hands. They just like,
Oh,
they're like, oh, it's detail. Hands are detail. It's almost like hands are synonymous with detail.
yeah, no,
And I
and
said, no,
no,
like strip it
I
down.
know that's strip
Well,
it down. Yeah, and so
you don't hear,
well,
because that's
now
what I was going to compliment you
to,
on.
I have to admit that one was again. I was on that manic, drawing those out and working the again. So there, we go back to that. It's like in the olden days, I would see that as a hand. Okay, and I'm still like trying to make it look right and everything, but I'm still seeing it as a hand. And people are saying to you, oh, big shapes first, yada yada. Look at this, simplification. But then one day it clicks. It's like, oh, it's just an abstract shape. It's just how you learn on different levels. Like you learn a principle, and then you go however many years or months later, and you learn that principle again. But this time you learn it just a little deeper. And we're always learning that. You're always
Yeah.
learning every single principle, and values or something. You don't just learn values and you're like, oh, I understand values. No, 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 no. You just learn it on that level. Then the next go around, when you're ready for it, you learn values on the next level and the next and the next until you're dead. You will keep learning these improvements. And so, like to get to this point when I'm working on those hands is like, oh God, I get hands on the next level now. And I'm so excited, it's like, this just abstract shapes, keep them simple, keep it simple, stupid, it's like,
And
but
they look
it's
so
taken me,
finished. That's the crazy
oh,
thing. They look so finished and gorgeous.
thank you.
The
That
foot
one,
too. The foot's quite simple too. It's not as simple as some others you've done, but I think
yeah.
it's perfect the way it is. It's
Yeah,
just gorgeous.
I think the hands were the success.
I wonder,
Yeah.
I want to look and
Thank
see
you.
if I can find some. Oh, here's another one though. So you hit this one. Another one where you've really
Around the
did
same
some
time.
beautiful simplified hands. You even let the fingers in shadow fall into the shadow under the leg. Just put it all
And
together.
how many years has it taken me, how many years does it take me to learn that lesson? Like,
I think you're
let
too
go,
hard on
Bryce.
yourself.
Let go.
Oh
Oh my
man.
God.
I don't know.
I
It's
think every studio, every artist studio has something like a torture chamber in the corner. At the end of the day, you go put yourself on the rack and, whip yourself to death. It's just like, oh my
yeah.
God, we're talking about,
We call it the crying wall at our studio here. My students call it the crying wall. After a critique, they go out to the crying wall. A great self promoter, right? Come study with me. You can cry on the crying wall.
and it's necessary.
All right, and I'm gonna just do this as a good concluding image because what I love about this is just the simplicity and beauty of it. It almost reminds me of those exercises that it seems like everyone did in art school, the blind where you had to do blind contour, or
Oh yeah.
but yet it's obviously not blind. It's too precise to be blind, but it's got that simplicity and that beauty and
Thank
in the simplicity
thank
of
you.
the lines. It's just
I
gorgeous.
really appreciate that. Yeah, I do drawings like that, and like you develop a clientele that want a you know working for yourself, of course, what I want, but you develop drawings to a certain level, and that's what your clientele kind of expects from you. And so when I get a drawing like this, it's just not going to work. It's not going to be to that level. I just put it in a drawer. But then you pull it out later and you think, well, I like it. But I didn't feel like I could sell it. So it just
Really?
stays with me. Yeah. So, and, I got a lot of good response on that one. I was kind of surprised.
So can you sell it now after all that response? You think you could sell it?
I would
I
just put
think
a
you could
lower, I
sell
mean,
it.
like I said, Camille she's like, Bryce, you got to raise your prices. What are you doing? And I was like, well, I will, but, I love selling to like, I have a couple Martin Campos. I have some Nicholas Uribes I was able to buy. And I love selling to people that are just average, everyday people that appreciate art and is like being able to, I don't know if this is sustainable and I plan on raising my prices at some point, but I'm kind of enjoying that. And so I would probably just put a lower price point on it, just a really low. And, I've got art friends that say, like you put too low a price tag on your artwork and it can be a negative thing. And I'm like, well, I understand that, but I just feel right about it. It just feels good. I like I kind of like where it is right now. I like what I'm doing. I like them to move. I like them to sell. I like them to be on somebody's wall or somebody else that appreciates them and not in my drawer. You know, they're not doing any
Yeah.
good in my drawer. So I just, and they just, people seem to really like them. I just really, you know, and I appreciate every person who has ordered anything off. You know, it's got to be hard to buy something online that you haven't actually seen. You know, and so to you know to have people purchase your artwork online, I'm just honored by every sale. It's amazing. So yeah, I'm excited. I still like it.
Hmm. Yeah, I've often wondered about that whole pricing psychology thing. And
That's the right term, psychology. You're
yeah,
right.
I know it's
I have to look.
real. I know it's real, and I even talk about it with my students. Um, because if you don't mind, I'll share you a story. So I
No,
worked with a
please.
guy. I used to do furniture, and I worked at this place that was like a high-end furniture place, and I did the wood turning and stuff for them. And this was in my early
Can I just
20s.
ask you, if you don't mind telling on video, who was it?
It was SSI. They're
Or,
closed now. They're out of
oh, Essex. Okay.
yeah.
Oh,
The one of the main dudes had a heart attack, and anyway, they're not around anymore.
oh, okay.
But they
All right.
did these huge, beautiful conference tables and whatnot. And I was just a 20 something. I was lucky to be wood turning. I worked there because I wanted to learn. I wanted to be around great craftsmen, and they were great
Right.
craftsmen, right?
Right.
So, and fortunately, I was the only one in there. They had a project where they're like, they needed to wood turn, and even though these are all great craftsmen, you don't typically have turned legs on conference tables. So they're
Right.
like, who are we going to get to wood turn? I said, I know how to wood turn. So I became their wood turner. So it was cool. But anyway, there was a guy there who was a faux finisher. Faux finishing is when you make one, for those who don't know, is make one object. It might be resin or wood into something like look like stone or some other material. So, or it might be, and I did this as well, where you might have an antique that you have to put back together and you fill it with all kind of resin and Bondo, and then you have to make it look like wood grain.
Hmm.
So I worked with this guy in doing projects like that. He was a master. He could make anything look like stone or wood grain or whatever.
Hmm.
But he was working at the time, this was 20 years ago, he was working for 25 bucks an hour in Salt Lake City. And then he moved up to Park City. And for those who don't know, Park City is money. Like that's where the money is.
Yeah. Big
Yeah.
money.
So someone told him, if you do faux finishing up in Park City, you're going to make some cash. So he moves his business up to Park City, but he's still only charging 25 bucks an hour and thinking he'll be a steal up there and he'll get all the work. He'll just take it right out from under everybody else. Obviously not in a
Yeah.
malicious way, but he's thinking he'll be fine, right? So
Yeah.
he goes up there and he gets no work. And then someone tells him, you got to raise your prices way up. These
Price.
people,
Low.
these people do not, they're going to think you're crap if you don't raise
Yeah.
your prices. They're used to spending a lot of money. They don't think it's worth anything if it doesn't have a high price tag. So he
Yep.
raised it from 25 to 75. And I know these numbers are right because I'll never forget it because it was so impactful. And all of a sudden, when he raised his price from $25 an hour to $75 an hour, he was so busy he just didn't. He had more work than he could handle.
Yep.
So it was a
true.
huge. It's a
true.
true thing. But here's the thing: faux finishing is not painting. So I think there is something to that even for a painter. But when you're as good as you are, a price isn't going to. You deserve a higher price. I agree with that 100%. But I don't think anyone is going to look at you and go, oh, his prices are cheaper, therefore he sucks at drawing and painting. Right? So the psychology is not quite linear, right? There's a little more to it. In
Maybe
my
I'm
in my
trying to mess up,
opinion, right? In my
I'm trying to
opinion.
mess up that psychology. Like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute, he's good, but he's selling cheap. What's going on? I don't understand. I'm confused.
No, people are like, man, he's really cheap. I don't know. I love that painting, but I'm not buying it. It's too cheap. I'm not sure that would happen.
I think in the gallery market, when I was in the gallery market, I think that was probably part of, I can never second guess the psychology because, you put your work in the gallery and I generally would try to keep it, there's a general price point in most galleries. There's a few above and a few below. And I was always there. And I was just thinking, they're going to come in and, pick an artist or a painting that's maybe a little bit cheaper, but I think quite often it would backfire. I think they would pick the more expensive one. But that's a gallery environment. It's a little bit different.
And in an auction house environment, it's probably going to be the way my faux finisher friend was.
Yeah,
everyone's holding up their signs and as the price gets higher and higher, everyone wants it more.
Oh, yep, exactly. Yeah. So I think maybe me selling, like I said, I love selling directly to the person that's buying this. There's no gallery involved in that. I'm not a very good, I told you, I'm not a very good marketer. I'm terrible. Like if I have to advertise or do anything, I swear, I feel like I had to go take a shower. Like, oh, God, I can't do that.
I am.
I just don't like doing it. I have to force myself to do it. But with that said, I love the direct connection of the person. I know where they're going, and they send me pictures of them hanging on a wall, and they appreciate it. I adore that. I love selling to, I always felt a little weird selling to, and again, my price point was never that high, but you're selling to, less than 1% of the population. And it's like, I kept feeling like that was a lack. Like there's too many artists. There's not enough people that, I don't think that was true, but I kind of saw it that way. But now I feel like there's no end to art appreciators that can afford a small price point. It's the whole world. Well, most of the world. And that gives me a feeling of abundance instead of a feeling of lack. So, and like I always raise my prices, and I've got some oil paintings coming up, and those prices will be a little bit higher, but lower price point, gather a clientele and go from there.
Well, you're doing fine. So this isn't directed at you personally, but what about this thought though? Because I admire your philosophy. Make art accessible to the public, to the general public, not the top 1%. And I think it's really cool, really generous. But what about this way of looking at things? So my brother loves watches. He gets these beautiful, expensive watches that have these incredibly crafted, gears and whatnot. I don't know watches, so I don't know how to talk about them. But
so he collects them.
He collects them to a degree, and other collectible things. And I remember once my mom telling me that she didn't understand it, and he explained to her that if he didn't spend whatever, $1,000, $500 or $1,000 on a watch like this, there would be no more watchmakers of this level, because that's what it takes for them to be able to quit their jobs and make a watch at that level.
Right.
So there's two sides of that coin, right?
Yeah.
You also think of another story is I was doing a portrait of a senator, and he had me in the Capitol Rotunda, and he was showing me all these buildings down in DC, and I was like, man, no one builds buildings like this anymore. He says, that's because there's not enough wealth in a democracy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So so on one hand, it's great to make things to affordable to the public, but on the other hand, if people don't pay a lot for art, then great art can't be made.
Can't be made. Yep.
Right. To some degree. Right. But you're managing to make it because you're still eating and you're making it.
Well, yeah. Thanks to my wife. But and I'm also thinking too on these multifigural things. When I get those going, they're going to be larger, and I think those
you're going to have to get paid.
They're going to go to galleries, and I feel good about that because they're going to be, galleries are quite particular about when you're selling on your own and they're selling your work. If there's any competition there, they don't like that. But I feel like the drawings and the small studies and single figures and things like that, I'm not going to send those to the gallery. So it's a completely different price points, completely different subject matter, I hope. And then what goes to galleries is going to be this maybe more contemporary multi-figure work on a large scale. And so that will have a completely different price point. That's kind of the thought.
Right. That makes sense. And of course, I'm not telling you, I'm not suggesting you should do one or the other. It's just a thought that I've really,
I agree with you.
Kind of put a lot of time into.
You kind of have to in this, because you make it up as you go, and we're all different. We all experience the whole world a little bit different. So you're like, how do I market these? What's the price point? Which psychology? You nailed that when you said pricing psychology. That's exactly what it is. It's not
Yeah.
one size fits all. You probably get it all the time too. You get young artists asking you, how do I price my artwork? Like, oh, how do you build a rocket to the moon? You can't answer that. There's too many variables. There's too many different ways, different markets, different people, different artwork. It's just, you have to kind of figure this out on your own. And it's really difficult.
Yeah, it
One of the
really
more
is.
difficult, and to feel confident about that price point. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah,
Yeah.
I'll have a little different approach.
Yeah. Yeah. For me personally, I could have a painting take me a year, 2 years. And I've never had anyone challenge me on my prices, but I could imagine someone saying, "How could you charge that much?" And of course, you don't charge by the hour. You can't do that because you could suck,
No.
and then you don't deserve. I mean, if you're not trained, you can't just say, "I took 10 years to sculpt this piece of poop." Like I should be paid for 10 years. Like that doesn't work like that.
Yeah. No, it doesn't work at all.
No, but if someone desires your work and it takes you a long time, the only way you're ever going to make it is if you get paid enough.
Yeah, you're right.
To support the time. Otherwise, you're not going to exist as an artist.
And those big paintings you do, those are elaborate, and you do spend, I guess, a couple years on those.
Sometimes,
those are not little, plein air studies that you spend a day on, and so you need that reward. And they deserve it. They're beautiful. They're, the clients that buy that know their value. So I could see, no one would do on your price point.
I could say the same about you. I mean, your work, I agree with Camille Corey, but I understand your sentiment. And I think it's really cool. And I don't think you should change your perspective until I've bought something. Just to be clear. Because I'm not the 1%. So anyway. All right. Well, let me ask you one more question and we'll finish up.
Sure.
And it's something I ask every artist. What is one piece of advice that you would give an aspiring young artist?
Ooh. Dang, I should have written some of the other answers down.
No, you're not allowed to copy.
What I would give an inspiring artist, wow. Could go so many different ways.
What's something you wish you knew when you were starting out? We've talked about a lot of things that you thought were mistakes. Yeah. What's something you wish you knew when you started out? I mean,
it'd be like, I think like the first thing, joking, is like, go do something else. Don't do it.
Don't say that. No.
It's I guess,
Okay, wait, before you move on, we should address that. Do you don't really feel that way? You must be happy doing what you're doing, right?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because I think that's worth talking about a little bit, or not even talking about, but at least addressing, because a lot of artists say that. And then I always think, but why are you still doing it if you really believe that?
Yeah, no. Oh, I've said it sometimes, like if I had another career, there have been times I might go do that other career. And sometimes it comes down to, this is all I know. I know this and Foundry work, and I don't have the body strength to do Foundry work. Even that's related to the arts, it is labor. You might as well be doing construction. It's not easy. And so it's like, this is all I know. And, I'm too old to go back to school. And I didn't do well in school, I think, because my brain is wired like an artist. So I don't know. It's what I am. It's what I have. It's what I do. But it just gets frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
It can be a struggle with the art or struggle with financially. Or, like you said, like on Instagram, you feel like you're left out of, everybody's doing so well except me, so there's just, I think it's just a really hard road. It's a lot harder than, that day I decided I'm going to be an artist. And then even like working for my boss, Edward Fraughton, I was kind of thinking when I was that age, like, as I get better, and this is kind of what he was able to do with his sculptures, as you get older and better, your prices go up. And, by the time you're kind of old, you're going to be making, hundreds of thousands of dollars on your paintings. That was an equation that I thought happened to all artists. I thought that was just the way it works. And then through a career, you find out it's not, that is for some, Howard Turpning or something like that, but that's not necessarily how it works. It's too varied. It's more difficult. There's a lot more nuances to it than I ever dreamed there would be. And today's age with the internet, it's changing so fast. It's not like it was in the 80s or 70s or 80s, very different things. So, I would have to say is like, if you're going to do this, you have to realize it's a lifelong pursuit. You can't, there's no easy road. And I know that's probably just simple. It's not anything great. But it's true. It's just like, you got to be ready for the long, hard haul. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times. And then, there's no guarantee of financial gain at some point. And also I would say in the beginning, like, if you're going to do this, don't let anybody dissuade you. Don't, if your parents aren't behind you and you have to do it, you have to do it. And it's just eating you alive. Just find the tenacity to do it. I think that without support from me, I think that maybe I don't have that personality. Maybe I don't have enough tenacity. So I think there's always been that little seed of doubt. And I think if I would have had a parent that supported me when I was that age, I think that would have made all the difference in the world. But I'm not blaming anybody. It's all on me. But yeah, if you have that personality and if you don't have any support, just do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
You only go around.
That is not Nike. We have no affiliation.
I'm gonna get sued. Oh no.
You're screwed, man. So whatever you were making on paintings, get ready to lose it all.
Dang, yeah. I'm waiting for the lawsuit letter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you only go around once, and if you don't do your art and you needed to, you'll regret it. At some point when you're old and you're working at Walmart, you're thinking, I should have done it when I was young. And maybe that's it. Don't wait till you're old. Do it when you're young. Get started. Yeah. Your brain's a sponge. Your brain will be a brick when you're older. When it's a sponge, man, soak it up. I don't know. So they're pretty practical. Those are totally practical. Like tonight, I'll be laying in bed and I'll think, why didn't I say that? That's so much more brilliant. But that's all I can think of. I
think that's great. This was an awesome conversation. It was really fun to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much.
It's been fun, Jeff. This has really been fun. Really enjoyed talking to you. We really need to hang out. We need to.
Yeah. We'll try and come tomorrow. It's tomorrow night. Try and come
if you tomorrow?
Can. It's tomorrow night.
Okay.
Yeah, 6 to 9. Hopefully I'll see you. If not, just give me a ring and we'll hang out some other time.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again. Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.